All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming in, having fun. I know that the casinos are madness out there, but it sounds like everybody had a great time. And we're going to kick off this morning with just a couple of announcements. Rafael is going back to Poland after, I guess, our discussion. But yesterday we made an announcement about the fact that we had pictures and we had things that would be going directly to the Ukrainian refugees through the Polish Foundation and what they're doing. So we learned about real action being taken, and we'll be summarizing that. For those of you that did go and bid on a picture, we'll be finishing that up today, so make sure you walk through there if there's anything you want to do. What you're doing is a pledge, and then I will be sending out emails to each of you with the direct link that Rafael mentioned yesterday where you can actually make the donation direct, okay? So that's how that's going to work. I want to just remind everybody, and Zach wore his suit, so that he would stand out here this morning. Okay. I told him, I said, this makes for a great show right here. But I want to announce to Rafael that people came up to me all night long, and we were very excited to say, and we'll kind of go in a note here. First of all, how many of you, would you just raise your hand so you could be recognized for the people that came in early and really helped us get this fund off the ground? Scott, I know you're back there, and I know that, yeah, I want to make sure that we recognize you. Connecta came in early. So there's a lot of you that have donated to the fund and continue to grow and have been able to do the work that we have so far. So I'm excited to announce that in our pledges, okay, of the pictures, we've got about $1,000. And Bill and Chrissy Cheney are coming in personally for $1,000. Ventura County Credit Union is coming in. Yes, thank you. They're coming in with $2,500, all right? Mitchell Stankovic is coming in for $2,500. And then we had an anonymous person come forward, and they said that they would match up to $5,000. And Tony has matched it already with Origins for $5,000. So thank you for that. Then, all right, Connecta has come in for another $10,000. And so we are just so blessed. And then the final announcement here is that Jay Moss has made a commitment to buy an ambulance. And that's a $20,000 investment. So I'm very, very proud of all of us. It's an exciting time. He'll be able to go back and keep the work going, and we'll just follow up with each of you. So please turn to your colleagues and give them a high five, because I really appreciate that. Okay, and Rafael, thank you so much for coming. If you want to make any final words.
Yes, thank you, Susan. Thank you for all. Thank you for the invitation, but first of all, thank you for your generosity and for your open heart to this situation. As I said yesterday, there are a lot to do, not only now, but also in a long-term perspective. So I'm very glad that we have such amazing friends here in the United States, and that we can count on you. It's, I'm sorry, but it's absolutely something unusual for me, and I'm very happy that I can spend with you some time. And now I have to go home because that's the lot to do. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, so now I can get us started this morning. I'm excited to start this morning with just asking the group, if you'll turn to your colleague there sitting next to you, what was one great idea? I mean, something that's going to stay with you and you're going to go back and implement. So take just a minute and think about, an ideas and action, something that we can push forward. Go.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you.
All right, what ideas are we going to put into action? Somebody raise their hand if they want to share an idea.
Raise your hand.
All right, Linda.
Do I have to stand up?
Sure.
So this isn't the full solution, but to research to see what can we do to help and identify members that it's not just about elder financial abuse, but maybe it's about human trafficking or it's domestic abuse. So what can we do? Not regulation, God no, but just to identify and have resources.
Excellent, thank you. Somebody else?
I wrote down a board assessment tool. I really liked that when I heard that yesterday. And then just double checking my board applications and background checks for my board to make sure they're up to snuff and that we're getting the right candidates that are applying and that we're doing the vetting that we're supposed to.
Excellent. Okay, Greg.
So we are going to be with Sue next week at a board retreat, and one of the things that we need to learn more about is FinTech. We don't feel like we know as a board what it is, how we can use it, and how we can be productive with that. Then the other thing is, one of the gentlemen yesterday said, if you don't know the 10 differences between credit unions and banks, you're fired, so I'm fired. So we're going to try to reinforce that at the board level also so that we can, continually reinforce that in our organization.
Thank you, Greg. That was, so I'll have 10 questions to ask you next week, because I think that was the recommendation. That was good. Anybody else want to share? All right, well, yeah, Lisa.
Thank you. We were talking about the CU Safe and how important it would be to kind of start something like that to where there's more focus on domestic violence and helping them through financial education for a win-win situation. It's like one of those areas that we know it's out there and you just don't think about it, but it really brought it to light yesterday, so appreciate that.
Thank you very much. One of the comments last night was also about the fact that fintechs and that whole environment of what you're going to see, those of you who are staying for Money 2020, what we talked about yesterday, what we're going to talk about today, is all about us really learning what the potential is, making those investments, working with our partners. And I didn't see you last night, but we thanked our I did see you last night, but I wanted to thank you again for sponsoring, and we're going to hear more about what Co-op's been doing in this area as well. And so I'm kind of excited to now, let's roll into a deeper conversation about what technology looks like. And so I'm going to ask Brandy Stankovic to come up, and I yesterday didn't do an introduction, and I'd like to. It's Dr. Brandy Stankovic, an organizational change expert, a motivational speaker, an artist, a mommy, who inspires firms globally with her models of leadership, engagement, and award-winning education. There's no one really like her, and if you haven't gone out and looked at strategichotbox.com, you should. Yeah. I know, I just thought I'd say about 550,000 plus followers. So please welcome Brandy.
Good morning. So I get to take the mic now. I feel like on day 2, that's perfect, having me on the mic. One, Zach's in a sparkle jacket. Sue's up here shaking it out. I feel like the conversations are going to be better today. Everybody's a little hungover, Why are you looking at me? No direct eye contact. So thank you. One of the takeaways that I have from yesterday, Stacey Walker said, inward, outward, forward. And I love that philosophy and just how we can apply it to whether it's board assessments, whether it's our leadership and things like that. So I'm excited to get us started. Shall we start with the first panel? All right. So our first panel is going strong. Right? And talking about market share, critical for the future, and how we use our strengths really to push forward in member well-being. And we have probably one of the best moderators ever, Mr. Frank Diekmans up here, cooperator-in-chief at cutoday.info. He keeps us informed, he's funny, and he also has been with us at the Underground since the beginning. So thank you, Frank, as our moderator. Next, we have Bill Cheney, the CEO of School's First Federal Credit Union, the legend of the industry, no doubt, and a recent announcement of the Herb Wagner, a lifetime achievement. Join us now. We also have Erin Mendez, the CEO of Patelco. If anyone knows member well-being, it's Erin, and she's integrating it into her culture and her organization. And then we have Todd Clark, who's just right in front, okay, who's now disappeared. Todd Clark is the CEO of Co-op, and he's bringing his experience and vision and how we can make some strides moving forward. So let's welcome our panel.
There we go. Good morning, everyone. I feel like I should be welcoming you to the Mitchell Stankovic version of the NFL pregame show. I also would be remiss, because I've noted this before, how consistent, and I have to applaud Mitchell Stankovic for repeatedly holding a meeting themed underground on top of buildings. We have a little bit less time today than we did yesterday for some of the sessions, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time speaking, and I appreciate you not applauding that. And instead, I want to really get the thoughts of our panel. I wanted just to touch on just a very quick thing. It's such a broad topic, both market share and pivoting. I will tell you that last night I checked, I used the See You Today search engine to just search the word market share. That appeared more than 700 times in the last 5 years. And I searched the word pivot in our database, and that appeared in more than 325 stories. So both are pretty active topics within credit unions. And as I said, they're both pretty broad as well. I also, before I begin, want to put our panel at ease and let them know I've already written the story, and this is the best panel. So let me ask, I'll start with you, Bill, if I could. What does this term, pivoting and market share mean to you?
Well, thank you, Frank. Market share is interesting. We spend a lot of time at our credit union focusing on how we can better serve our 1.2 million members, most of them school employees. And we don't spend a lot of time talking about market share or growth. In fact, we just had a management team meeting, I guess it's last week now since it's Sunday morning, and talked specifically about the fact that people ask me all the time about our growth strategy. Growth and market share kind of go along together. We don't have a growth strategy. Growth is an outcome for us. We have growth projections because you have to do that to do capital planning and budgeting. But we don't spend a lot of time focusing on market share. Now, when I arrived at the credit union 8 years ago, somebody told me that if you are a school employee in Orange County, California, which is where we started, there's a 70% chance that you're a member of Schools First already. But that's pretty strong market share, 70%. That doesn't count their family members. That's just school employees. Aaron may know more about market share at Schools First than I do, especially 8 years ago. But it's just an outcome. So we provide world-class personal service to our members. We focus on their financial well-being, which I think is absolutely critical, and we can talk some more about that. And the growth's going to happen, right? They're going to refer their coworkers. They're going to refer their family members. Membership drives a lot of the success in our organization. Growing membership drives almost everything in our organization. And that membership grows because of the service that we provide and the referrals we get from our members.
Same question for you, Aaron. How do you view this large issue of market share?
So I guess the first word I would use is ditto, and then I'll add to it. So I will tell you, I have board of directors who believe in market share. What I believe in is mission share or fair share. We are not a size of an organization, any of us here, that can overwhelm market share in the classical sense. And so to me our mission is to build our members' financial health and well-being. That needs to be our niche. It needs to be 100% within the organization and consume our focus. And when we do those things right, that's what I mean. Then we get mission share, we get our fair share, and then what you have is our membership growth, to give you an example, and I think it's only because of our focus on financial health, for the last 3 years has been over 8%. Now you compare that to the industry average, and it's kind of good, okay? But it's good because the majority of our membership growth is membership referrals because we help them. And so the team's ability to reach and make a difference in each member's life that they're connecting with, those are the moments of mission share. And if you don't have membership growth in a thriving, sustainable way, you're going to have problems in the future. So to us, our niche of financial health, what we're doing to make a difference, it's much more about that than it is about classic market share to us.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question before I get to Todd? How do you know you're making a difference?
Well, we know from the surveys we give members and what they tell us. We know from Yelp reviews. We know from conversations. So there's a lot of outreach methodologies that you use, and you get direct feedback from members. You know, one of the things, and Schools First does this too, we both use the Gallup Financial Wellbeing Survey as opposed to an NPS survey. And the information you get from the members on those surveys is all about their financial well-being. So it's their emotional connection to money. But the information you get, the verbatims you get, sometimes will crush you. I mean, really, people are struggling. And we have certified team members who know how to do financial planning and can work directly. And anytime we get those comments, we give them to our 50-plus team members who call the members and say, okay, you told us this. Now let's sit down and figure out how we can move you forward. So those are methods to how you know you're making a difference.
Thank you. Todd, I'll ask you, you're a large CUSO, obviously, so you come at this market share issue from a different perspective than credit unions, but Co-op also does a lot of research in this area. How do you view the issue of market share?
Well, let me give you a couple of things. One, we serve credit unions. We actually have, I think it's 3 bank customers, but every time it's been when a credit union person has left and gone to work for a bank and then asked us if we would serve that bank, and so we've said yes. So we focus almost exclusively on the credit union market, and so I view our job is helping you guys deliver your message, right? And so as you think about market share, Erin and I talked about this at length last night, and I think that she hit it right on the head. This is about engaging in everyday moments in your members' lives. Credit unions are fantastic at life stages, right? Car loans, student loans, home loans. But when they pull that card out of their wallet or they double click on that iPhone to pay, is it your card that comes up? Are they thinking about you every day? And so, you know, market share, mind share, wallet share, I think those all are a mix that you have to think about. I don't know any credit union that looks and says, I control 50, 60, 70% of the market I'm in. And of course, I'm sure that there are, but I think most of you are hitting it right, which is how am I helping that person? How am I driving them forward? You don't do it just for the income. I view my job and Co-op's job is to give you the tools to allow you to do it. Because the companies like Chime and Acorn and Robinhood, they're coming out trying to carve a little piece of your wallet share or your mind share of your member off at a time. And they're doing it through really great member experience. That is an expensive proposition. I mean, it's a really expensive proposition. And I think, you know, credit unions have never, ever lost money without being conserved. I mean, that just doesn't happen very often, right? I mean, it's a no-no in the credit union space to think about a year or 2 or 3 years of losing money. Your competitors, Chime, Acorn, Robinhood, they don't make money. They're growing market share. All they care about is market share. All they care about is taking that share from you. And so you're fighting a battle against them, and they're playing by different rules because they can go 10, 12, 14 years and never turn a profit to take all that from you. And then one day, they'll start introducing all the products that you offer, right? Chime entered as a debit card only. Now what are they doing? They're taking deposits. Now what are they doing? They're just giving loans. Well, that looks a lot like you guys. And they're doing it with great member experience or customer experience in their words. Even SoFi is stealing your terminology and calling their people members. Well, they're not members of anything, right? They're just members of a for-profit company that is trying to make money off of them. We actually believe and care about our members. I think Co-op's job in this whole thing, and you talk about a pivot, we pivoted away from a reseller of somebody else's technology to technology that is owned by credit unions and for credit unions and will never leave credit unions. And so that I think is what our job and how I think about market share.
Thank you. I want a very quick digression, only follow up a point that Todd made. I have an opportunity every year to speak to a group of directors, a big credit union directors conference. And the last time I spoke to them prior to speaking, we asked each attendee coming, each board member who was coming to that conference to sign up for a fintech, to ask them to sign up for a Chime or an Acorn or someone. And then we had 10 of them come up on stage and talk about their experiences. I only share this because, first, their experiences were fascinating, and second, because this point came up earlier before we began about boards and fintech. It's a great requirement for boards. At some boards require everyone to sign up for one and then share their experience, because otherwise they're not going to. But let me get back to a point that Todd raised. I want to ask Bill and Aaron, how much attention do you pay to a wallet share?
Wallet share, yes. Not so much market share, but wallet share, absolutely. Because, I mean, it's one thing to be a member with a $5 share account, and we'll let members do that if that's what they want to do. A lot of credit unions don't, and I'm not saying that's wrong. But we want the relationship, right? We want our cards to be top of wallet. And we know that, I'm just going to assume, probably easiest to assume, almost all of our members have more than one card. I do. I hate to admit that here among my friends, but I do.
You're lucky I'm not writing about this one.
Thank you, Frank. But in fact, when we survey our members, it's interesting. It's been a couple of years now since I've seen the results, but only 8% of our members tell us that they have a relationship with another credit union, any credit union, which is shocking to me. And that hasn't changed in 8 years that I've been there. 30% of our members say they have a relationship with Chase. 32% of our members say they have a relationship with Wells Fargo. God bless them. Yeah, exactly. 30% of our members say they have a relationship with Citibank. Most of that has to be credit cards. So we do have very strong usage of both our credit products and our debit card, but we're not always top of wallet, and we work very hard with our partners to make sure that we do what we can to make that happen. Much more important than market share to us is wallet share.
In quick follow-up, Bill, I assume that most of those bank credit cards are people with travel benefits.
Probably.
And you mentioned card wanting to be top of wallet. How does Schools First do that?
We're fortunate. Well, we do it through rewards on our credit products, and I think I guess I'm not even sure, honestly, Frank, what the incentive is on the debit side. Except out of 1.2 million members, we have 1 million debit cards, which, if we talk to our partners, our usage is very high. But there's not a rewards. We don't have rewards on our debit card. Thank you, Senator Durbin. You know, the Durbin Amendment last year on the debit side cost us, or this year, will be about $30 million in revenue. It's hard to share the revenue when you don't receive it.
Aaron, same question for you. Do you pay attention to wallet share?
We pay attention to wallet share and participation in all products and services. On the wallet share side, we actively work with the credit bureaus that if our members happen to be inquiring, we get that information and we go out instantly to them. And then talk about what we can do to them, how we do it. So we use some proactive approaches to make sure that if it's our members, they're redirected to our products and our card products. We also have one of our card products is a balance product that we call our Pure Card. And we call it a Pure Card, doesn't have rewards or anything, but it has a very, very low interest rate. It's an under market, intentional low risk interest rate that we believe it's one of our financial health products. So if you're gonna carry a balance and you're gonna have some revolving, at least this will give you a lower interest rate so that you could get out of debt at some point. And that's probably, unfortunately, one of our most active card products. in usage and in payments and repayments and in how that's positioned. And certainly we have reward cards. But you know, reward cards are very interesting because it is very difficult to compete with Capital One and Chase Rewards. They have money that you don't have. So what you have to do is really understand your membership and what's the rewards that will appeal to them. Because if you are playing in a mass market, I think you're going to lose because you can't. So understand the behaviors and the needs of your members and realign your points and your rewards to what your members are needing and wanting. And I think those are the ways you get your cards richer, is when you really hone in on your members and how you can make a difference for them.
Thank you. Todd, I'll ask you, what has been co-op's experience and what is most effective in working with credit unions at building wallet share in cards, for instance?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the actual member experience, right? Part of the reason Chime is so successful and those other guys are so successful, and I'm a little like you, Frank, at our CEO conference this summer. I challenged the audience, open up your app store and search debit card, and then start scrolling down and see how many pages you go through before the first credit union pops up, right? It's hundreds of, you might get to Navy eventually, like down at 88 or something like that, different choices before you get there. If you've never applied for an Apple Card, just do it to see what the experience is like. Now, fair warning, it'll affect your credit score, but only for a short period of time. But you need to see how easy it can be to get credit. And I always say, if your members are looking for liquidity, they're going to find it. You need to be there and be prepared to provide it. Otherwise, they're going to go get it from a predatory lender of some sort, whether it be Payday or whether it be Credit One or whoever it is out there with a 24% credit card that's going to tie them up forever. So I think member experience and the way I think about it is apply, quick decision, push the card right into the wallet on the phone, deliver a piece of plastic in the next 2 or 3 days, but have that card available for use right then. When the card loads to their wallet, ask them, would you like this to be your primary card in your Apple Wallet or in your Android wallet? Would you like this to be the primary card in your Prime account, in your Netflix account? All those things happen right at the point of interaction, and those are the kind of tools that we're trying to provide for you guys to make it an easy pathway for you to stay top of wallet and get that wallet share. And so as I think about my job in this world, it's to provide those tools so the credit unions do it. Every credit union in the room utilizes this differently. Everyone utilizes it differently. Some people are way out in front of this, and some people are like, well, I don't have anybody asking for it. And I think my guess is that's because you're not asking them if they want it. It's nice to hear, Bill, that you know exactly where they are, right? And like you, I carry 17 cards because I like to understand what's going on in the marketplace.
The ultimate in juggling.
Yeah, well, I do. It's a weird dynamic. I do 2 or 3 transactions a month on about 10 or 12 different cards just to see the offers that I get and how it works, because I'm trying to build the best I can for you guys, and so I think I have to understand what's happening out there.
Thank you, Ted. To Todd's point, by the way, I have to echo what 2 of the speakers said yesterday about their kids. I have a 22-year-old daughter who I mentioned something about having a debit card, and she looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, well, how do you transact business? And she said, well, I just use Cash App. It's so easy, Dad. And I started trying to explain things to her about how things should work. I'm just mentioning that to you because my kids have never in their lives been on a trip that didn't involve a credit union convention. And if they aren't involved in credit unions, yeah, and maybe that's the reason. Someone said that. Maybe that's the reason. I was
same here, right? Our oldest son, when we were moving money into his account in college, it was quickly leaving the account, and Susan was like, "What do you think's going on?" And I said, "Well, he's probably moving it to Venmo." And that's exactly what he was doing. He would get the deposit, he would move it to Venmo the very next day, and that's how he interacted with his friends. And I hate to spoil it, but Sam's about to get up here probably and tell you that for the first time ever, Venmo PayPal is now the most trusted brand in financial technology. That includes you guys, right? And that is that's a powerful move for something that was just meant to pay for like garage sale stuff on eBay one time, right?
I was remiss earlier by not mentioning, if anyone has a question, please feel free to raise your hand at any time. I'm happy to interrupt, and we'll take the questions. One thing I did want to ask our panel before time's up is another theme in this presentation has to do with pivoting. You all lead large organizations. Where have you had to pivot, and how do you deal with pushback to that pivot? Anybody wish to start? Bill?
Yeah, I don't know per se that I would call it pivoting. We certainly had to change with the pandemic. We all did. And it's been interesting in an organization of 2,700 employees, 1,000 of whom work in our branches. And so the 1,000 people who work in our 70 branches never had a choice. Well, they had a choice, I suppose. But if to work at the credit union, their work was in our branches face to face. And I've worked very hard to continue to acknowledge that throughout this process, because many of the other 1,700 had some choices, and we had some flexibility in terms of work location, keeping them safe, providing the technology that they needed to be remote. But those other people didn't, and they did a fantastic job. And I must say, I continue to be amazed by the positive attitude of the people who didn't have the choice. So now, I'm sure we're all, regardless if you're a CUSO or a credit union, still dealing with how do we do this going forward in terms of work location. And we have a work location philosophy, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. And there's always going to be, I guess now, this sort of push and pull between in the office or in the branches or working from home. I'm not, we say it's based on your position first, and then based on what you want to do. Some people want to be in the office. I'm one of those. Your aptitude, I'm just not a work from home person. I can work remotely when I'm on the road. We know how that works, Frank. But I don't know. It's been very interesting, and it's going to continue to be. It is interesting to me. We have had some team members who have left for the promise of remote work, and then the rules have changed. Ask Jamie Dimon. Jamie Dimon came up yesterday. Ask Jamie Dimon about that, or Elon Musk, what they think about remote work. I'm supportive of it, and it's working, and we're allowing it. But that's, if you'd asked me in February of 2020 if we'd have 1,000 people working from home, I would have said, why would we want to do that?
And a similar question, has the organization had to pivot in a particular place, and how have you dealt with pushback?
So I think all of us have got to have an expertise in pivoting. And your management team, and particularly your executive management team, better have an expertise in pivoting, because in every volatile economic time, you are going to pivot multiple times of not what you planned, but what you got. So let alone the pandemic year of 2020, and for my Californian brethren, pivoting during that time was a little worse than other states because of the restrictiveness of California. But this year, you got to think of how you've already pivoted. And if you're not pivoting effectively in a crazy interest rate environment that you've never lived through before, no one has seen the speed of interest rate changes, you can't keep to a plan when the world is changing around you, even if it's just the economical world. And so if you are not skilled in pivoting and how you move an entire organization to turn right because that's what happened to you, and you're still going straight, it becomes, it could become suicide almost economically. So I think pivoting has to be an absolutely one of the top skills to even handle the fluctuation of time in the economy.
Todd, same question for you. You lead a large organization, a diverse workforce spread across the country. Wherever you had to pivot, how do you get everyone to buy into that pivot?
Yeah, that is, Sam's laughing in the front row if you can't see her. Champion change is in our core values, our 4 core values. And I got, when I got to Co-op, I got to an organization that really hadn't changed very much in 20 years. It had grown, but it really was basically doing the same thing it was doing 20 years before. And when I entered the realm, I said, listen, PCI compliance was done by sort of a rubber stamp company. We didn't really think about SOC Type 1, SOC Type 2. We're going to be a technology company. We have to have the tightest and the highest level of PCI compliance. We have to be SOC 2 Type 2 across our entire enterprise, right? And so we started at that very point putting things into place to make that happen, and people started quitting right and left because we were upsetting their apple cart in a major way. And when you're trying to drive change like that, there are going to be people who resist. They're going to circle the wagons. And you've got to be willing to say we're willing to live without those people and go find those people who will say, just because we did it this way yesterday doesn't mean we have to do it that way today, right? And so we only have 4 key tenets in our company, and to think that one of them is champion change says a lot about what we're doing at Co-op. Now, that's actually hard on you guys too, because we're changing a lot for you. If you've been with us for 25 years, then you're seeing change, right? And driving that change. You want something better on the other side? You know, I'm asking you to be a little patient with us as we drive a lot of change into the core platforms that will allow us to make it better on the other side. And so we turned over, I turned over the entire executive team at Co-op, and that was hard because I really liked a lot of those people. But it was important to do what we needed to do to bring in the skill set and the talent. And I think that's one of the things that credit unions sometimes struggle with, is bringing in somebody from the outside who's seen different things in their careers. I would encourage you to do it regularly and often because it will help you drive that pivot. And with regard to COVID, we were already 20% work from home. Now we're 47% work from home. That was actually a fairly easy transition for us. And but I'm with you, Bill. I see Jamie and Elon's pathway. I think this is all cyclical, just like the economy tends to be cyclical. We're going to go way over the edge to where everybody works from home, and then we're going to realize, wait, we want to come everybody back to the office. And so I'm not totally out of commercial real estate as an opportunity at some point.
Before we conclude, do we have any questions in the audience, or I have a final question if we do have one?
Thank you. My question is for Todd. Todd, one of the things that we run across is working with you. So we're actually looking at you guys for credit cards, and we're very impressed. But one of the things that we're running across is just from an industry standpoint is some of our service partners, particularly our data processors, are not prepared for this pivoting. And so, like, we're ready to go and run, and we run into this roadblock. Do you have any suggestions of how we can approach that with these business partners when, say, we're going to partner with you, and you're ready to go, and they're not?
Well, in this last 18 months, Bruce Drott, Bruce, wave your hand back there, who leads our product group, has started a new program. I think partially in, I don't know where the idea came from, but I'll give Joan credit for it. Joan in the back said, you know, Co-op, you should use your power. You'll take the credit? You don't even know what I'm going to say. You should use your power. And so we're starting to organize groups of, I'm Correlation, I'm Alchemy, I'm Co-op, and going in a show of force, right? Because it's hard to mix core and a digital provider and a co-op client or a potential co-op client that we don't have 10, 12, 14, 18 of. And when you go by yourself, that's exactly how those providers want you to come. so they can say, well, sure, we'll do that. It'll be $50,000, or it'll be $80,000, or it'll be $170,000, whatever it is, right? And they get to do that to each individual one, right? We're trying to go as a unified front and say we've got 17 credit unions that total, 60 billion in assets, and we want this. So give us one price and do it for everybody, right? And so we're getting more organized on that every single time. And I would say there's some people who are like leaning hard into it, and there are others that are really resistant. And I won't name names up here, but if your core or your digital provider is not saying the word open a lot, right? We're open to partnerships. We're open to this. We don't want to put you in a tiny little box. Then you should really think about leaving. That's the world. Open banking is coming to the United States, whether we like it or not. It may not ever become law here, but because all the big banks across the world have had to live with it in Europe, it's going to be here, and we need to be more prepared for it. So that's the first answer I would come up with.
Aaron, you mentioned in terms of your member engagement and Net Promoter Score, and I don't remember the name of the other, the tool that you use. Can you describe that a little bit more and what the advantage is?
Sure. So we don't use Net Promoter. So we use Gallup. Gallup has a financial well-being survey, and the questions are all around the members. And example of questions: do you believe your credit union helps build your financial health? Do you believe the credit union people you're working with are approachable? They'll ask satisfaction scores. They'll ask how convenient and easy is it to do business. So it's built around the things that are how people think about their money, how they believe they are standing, meaning, do I believe I'm financially healthy? They'll rate themselves in the process. So the survey is much more, I would only say intimate in the question that it's asking. And so you'll get verbatims back, right, that are much more intimate in what they're telling you. So I find it's, for us and our mission and our focus, much richer information for how we can focus and make it better, whether it's experiences, whether it's products, and building. And we've built several products that are what we call our financial health suite of products. Whether it is re-educating some of our staff, it's built differently than NPS. So,
And I would just comment briefly, sorry, Frank, that we use Gallup as well. Very similar on the member engagement side. We do include Net Promoter just so we have a point of comparison and benchmarking against other organizations, not just credit unions, but on the member financial health and member engagement, very similar to what Patelco's doing. So.
No, it's okay. I was just going to ask Brandy if we had time for Bill. Oh. That's it. So are we good at time or? Right there? All right. I want to thank Bill, Aaron, and Todd, and all of you for joining us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Excellent panel that we had. Appreciate all of them very much. I loved the conversations around wallet share and around mind share and around all the different pieces that go into member well-being. I would like to now introduce Samantha Paxson, who is the Chief Experience Officer at Co-op Solutions. And we did get a little taste, a little teaser about what's happening here, but she's going to talk to us about market share, how it's going strong, and what some of the latest research is. Samantha?
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you all for having me here. It's such a pleasure to be here at the Underground. One thing that I really love about speaking at the Underground is that this is a place where we talk about the real stuff. We get real. What happens in our industry is that oftentimes we kind of are insular, we don't poke at things, we don't ask the hard questions. And what I love about what Mitchell Stankovic puts together is that we can create a forum where we talk about what's really happening and we look at the hard truths. So the first time I spoke at the Underground was back in 2020. It was before I got on a plane home and didn't quite realize after GAC that we were about to go through one of the hardest things we've ever been through. I'd even argue it was harder than 2008. One of the things that we talked about was growth strategy, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. And what I want you to walk away from this meeting today is I want you to be fired up that you can grow, you can compete. But I think what the panel just talked about, we are in a tremendous time of uncertainty, and we are in a tremendous time of opportunity. And the reason why you have opportunity is that you center everything you do on the member. And what I'm about to argue today, I do have slides. I know it's kind of an Underground no-no. But what I'm going to argue today is that your P&L is going to be centered around your member. So let me tell you about that. I'm going to show you what credit unions are going to be in the next 5 years. If you can progress the slide. So back when Todd first started, when he started talking about being a financial technology company and not being a reseller of other people's things, he started in 2016. And I'm going to take us through a trip back in time. In 2016, we discussed digital transformation. That was a lot of what we talked about. And what we thought about was taking our existing solutions and delivering them digitally. And what we thought was that our members will then have a way of engaging with us in a different way. That's how we kind of thought about that. And we thought about that consumer usage in a life stage standpoint. We thought about it when they graduate college, they're going to need a car loan. When they get married, they're probably going to need a home loan. And we had interactions with our members that were about every 5 to 7 years. So when we talk about this idea, this primary financial relationship, we've moved from primary financial institution to primary financial relationship. What I'm going to say now, moving on to the next, is that we're moving to this idea of primary financial interaction. You have to meet that member moment by moment by moment and be their choice for that moment. Something that we say at Co-op is make every experience matter. How do we go about doing that when we have fintechs? We're in the mecca of fintech this week. We have fintechs that the incredibly empowered consumer has the ability to make the choice, download the app right from their phone, and be able to be engaging use case by use case by use case, which slowly disintermediates your member from you. So how do you win market share, wallet share, incredible utilization of your credit union moment by moment, so that we are designing our credit unions by life stage and by lifestyle? So we used to think about this idea of digital interaction, just delivering our solutions in a digital way. What the member is needing, what Aaron just talked about, is the member is needing an outcome of financial well-being. So how do we put together, how is the market putting together this idea of convenience bundles based on what your members need? So what you'll see in the research that we do a lot of research, a lot of consumer research that helps to inform our organization about the value bundles that we will then give to you so that you can win the moment by moment market share war. And you can do it because your members know that you are centered on their overall financial performance and their overall financial well-being. But what are the use cases that come together in order for you to win that moment? And so this whole idea of understanding your member, using the data that you get from how they behave in their daily financial lives, using that to then inform what you would put on your product roadmap and how those products will come together. This is where the market is going. So the big winners, they're focusing on, as we've moved through this idea of digital transformation, they're focusing on becoming an ecosystem of value. How do I understand and personalize my solution sets in order to engage that member in every moment? So they're thinking about, I know a lot of what we do in our planning is looking at demographics, psychographics. What we need to look at is the behavioral data on how your members are transacting every day, every moment, and then be able to design our credit unions around that member. That's what the big banks are doing. That's what PayPal is doing. PayPal, in the research that we've done among 3,000 consumers in the United States, across the entire geography of the United States, your existing credit union members are choosing PayPal as the most trusted financial relationship that they have. They aren't choosing it, PayPal, because they're the best deal in town. Our value proposition as credit unions is to create incredible capabilities for us to be able to deliver the utmost financial well-being, to create the best financial outcome for your members. So how do we create this sophisticated, needs-based ecosystem of value? Next slide. So this is where we're going. I just did a board planning session. I serve on the board of a credit union. I have for the last 8 years. And the credit union said, or one of the board members said, I just thought this was gonna slow down. I thought we'd just be able to kind of kick into cruise control. I'm like, it is not slowing down. It is speeding up. This idea of pivoting, this idea of figuring it out, we have to be so skilled at that. We have to be passionate about our members and designing our credit unions around our members. This is something Co-op is incredibly passionate about. Back in 2020, I came to the Underground and I said, payments is the path to growth. Why is payments the path to growth? It's because it is how your members are engaging with you. It is how they are behaving. It's how they are spending their money. And when you understand how they are behaving, you can then help them create a better outcome for the overall financial well-being. So what we're going to do is kind of take this idea of digital interaction and make sure that they are interacting with you on a daily basis. How do you know that you are boosting member economic participation? When I serve on the board of a credit union, we look at the financials. The financials look back 3 months. We say, how'd we do? What do we look at? Loans. We're looking at the member economic participation from a loan product performance standpoint. We have an incredible opportunity to say, okay, how is our member interacting with us? Are we building those deposits? Are we building that engagement? Are we building that utilization? Because if we're not, that member is slowly fading away from the credit union. And how can we be the most essential type of financial services in the market when that member is slowly fading away? We need to be the center of their financial lives. We need to be this ecosystem of value centered on an audience of one. An audience of one. I want my credit union designed for me. You want your credit union designed for you. How do you understand what your members need? How can Erin's credit union deliver that overall financial outcome that her members are wanting? It's an incredible value proposition for us. Our value proposition is not to be the best deal in town. Our value proposition as a credit union movement is to create the best overall financial outcome for our members. And it isn't just being the low price leader. So how did this evolve? This is, I think we can make sure that you guys all receive these slides because I think this is really important on the next slide. It kind of shows that progression about where we were back in 2016, 2017, how we understood that we can actually deliver our service model in a digital manner. Now what we need to do is to say, how can we deliver the financial outcomes that our members expect and have them trust that we have the capability to deliver those outcomes? And lastly, what you're going to deliver is a curated, connected, personalized experience for each one of those members. You're gonna use your data. You're gonna use your payments data. You're gonna lean into payments. Credit cards are not a bad word. Your members need access to liquidity, especially in a bumpy economic environment. They should get that liquidity from you. You're the good guys. You're gonna do the right thing for them. They need to be able to transact and have access to their money. So we need to focus on interactions, experiences, decisioning, solutions. the processes, the data, and the platforms. And when you do this, you move from that preferred financial interaction to complete trust. And our members trust us to do the right thing. Do they trust us to have the capability to meet their needs? And when I tell you, you can do this, you just prove to yourselves that you can do really hard things. So what I can tell you now is get after it. I know you can do it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It always, you do inspire so many questions, which I think is part of the challenge and part of all of us to continue to have these conversations when we meet with each of our colleagues. Now we've got another star-studded panel. Shall I introduce them? FinTechs, the good, the bad, and the necessary. Let's talk about it. Having more than $400 million in credit union investments, FinTechs are certainly the future. Our moderator first is Brian Haas, the president of CMFG Ventures, and he is definitely leading the way on innovation. Next, we have Paul James, a board director from Connecta Federal Credit Union, and he is a volunteer, but he's also pushing relevant concepts and innovative ideas. Welcome. Then we have Kevin Polinsky, the senior director of FinTech Solutions at CUNA Mutual Group, giving people of color and different minorities opportunities. And finally, we have Mr. Steven Stapp, and he's the CEO of Unitas Community Credit Union, and as you know, across the globe is engaging, is leading, and challenging all of us to be the best versions of ourselves. So please, take it away.
Great, thank you so much. Unfortunately, Elizabeth McCluskey, who is going to be here, and she leads the Discovery Fund, which is the fund I mentioned yesterday that is dedicated to investing in companies in the fintech space led by diverse founders. Apparently, the pilot of her plane did not want to land in 70-mile winds last night, so she was stuck back in Washington, D.C. But very happy to have Kevin stepping in here. So, a lot of talk, certainly around fintechs over the last 24 hours. As Sam mentioned, I mean, we're really at the heart of financial technology here in this hotel with Money 2020 kicking off later today. So, probably around 10,000 people will be here talking about the latest technology, the latest trends. And I think one thing that to me is probably a little bit concerning is there's only about maybe 120 credit union attendees out of the 10,000 people here. And when I look back to last year, we actually have fewer credit union participants in Money 2020 this year than a year ago. And that's a problem, I think, for the industry. Things are moving fast, and they're only going to move faster over the next 5 years. A lot of the infrastructure really has been built out. Now these companies are scaling. We talk about market share. There's $130 billion raised last year alone by fintechs. They've got a lot of dry powder to go after and grow market share. So we're going to talk a little bit about fintech partnerships. I sometimes still sense a bit of skepticism around credit unions partnering with fintechs. I think some feel like maybe they're selling out. But we've got a great panel really looking at it from a couple different angles. So with that, let's jump right into things. And so, Paul, I'm going to start with you. I mean, as a board member, what conversations are happening, at the board level, and maybe what conversations should be happening, and what can we do to kind of get directors of credit unions, more aware and engaged around fintechs and maybe the benefits and risks of these types of partnerships?
Thanks, Brian. That's a big question there. So I'm going to sneak up on the answer. Yeah, exactly. 30 seconds. So I thought I'd talk about a couple of things. I thought I'd talk about something that's obvious, and then I thought I'd talk a little bit about governance, which I think kind of gets to your question. In terms of obvious, we're all here to talk about fintech. The panel is described as the good, the bad, the necessary. It reminds me of the old Shakespearean question, to fintech or not to fintech? And I think we're all here because the answer is obvious to that question. Little audience participation, show of hands. Who saw the news piece just last week about the latest Apple, the auction of the early Apple iPhone? Anybody? Okay, so I thought it was fascinating that the first edition, brand new version, unwrapped in the box, one of the original iPhones went for almost $40,000 about last week. So as if that's not interesting enough, that's a 2007 edition iPhone. So that's what, 15 years ago, right? So that says something about what was then revolutionary is now ordinary. We've talked about PayPal, that's about 25 years old. Let's see, Venmo is less than 15 years old. The other one, oh yeah, the bank version, the original version is less than 15 years old. So it just goes to show that as fintech evolves, and this is an evolutionary environment we're in, the stuff that used to be fascinating is now just taken for granted, and our members expect that, as well as the things that people are in this room, have been working on not just 2 years ago. So why is that important? Because somebody in the audience asked the important question yesterday. How much? When? What? How do we make decisions? Spoiler alert, I don't know. I don't have that answer. And my guess is that anybody in the room who says they do know and does have the answer is selling something. Ouch. All right. All right, touchy subject. Okay, so enough of the obvious. So let's talk about governance, which I think gets to your question. On our board, we have sort of two approaches to answering your question. The first is bet the horse, don't bet the farm, which leads to how many horses can you bet before you bet the farm? Okay, that's a fair question. So which leads to the second point in our approach, which is we view thinking about fintechs as part of our long-term strategy. And just so that we're all singing from the same sheet of music, because it's Sunday, strategy in my mind is about those things that give a competitive advantage to serving our members, because it's all about serving the members. And so then how does strategy translate into strategic thinking and strategic planning process? The emphasis is on the process, it's not an event, it's ongoing. So for us, we make thinking about fintech part of our ongoing process. So we have dialogues at every board meeting about a variety of educational topics. We call them deep dives, and fintechs is one of them. And it shows up in a couple of ways. Raj, you're here still somewhere? So CIO Raj, who was up here yesterday, does a great job, for instance, in one of his reviews of an operational area, IT, we'll call it. And let's say, face it, fintechs is an important part of his presentation, and he does a great job, not of just talking about this year's plan, but he talks about the long-term strategy and the longer-term roadmap. That's really important to us as we think about how fintech is going to shape our business and what we're going to do. Beyond that, not only do we have presentation from somebody on the inside, we bring in somebody from the outside who can help us with a fintech environmental scan. So, because we believe that understanding the current state, the outlook, and most importantly, the lessons learned is something that we need to understand as we think about our strategic planning. So there you go. A little bit about the obvious and something that you can take home and do.
Great. Excellent advice. Steve, kind of the same question, but maybe, wearing your CEO hat, would also like to hear, a little bit about, sort of your process for vetting fintech opportunities and how you manage those relationships.
Great, thank you. And did you actually quote Shakespeare this morning a little bit? Well, I'll go a different route. When I think about this, it is kind of like the Clint Eastwood movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I'll leave the necessary there. Absolutely partnering with fintechs is absolutely necessary for us. And I will say we take an approach in three different areas. One, we look at how can we improve our customer experience? How can we deliver our products and services? Second, how can we create better efficiencies in our back offices and how we're processing? And then third, how can we better serve our community? And then I'll go back to that, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We watch our partners very carefully. some of our partners here in this room. What are they doing? What products and services or what new fintech opportunities are they doing? Maybe they're creating that path for us, so that's an opportunity for us. Second, we'll look at, hey, maybe there's a fintech that's out there that we need to partner and learn more of, so we dive into that. And then the third is, all right, something's not out there. How can we create that path? But how can we create that path in conjunction with a fintech? And I'll give you an example of that, and I'll start with the community aspect. In Portland, Oregon, no surprise, we were at the forefront of the aftermath of the death of George Floyd. We had over 100 consecutive nights of protests, many of those which resulted in riots. We saw that there was real pain in our community. So I will tell you, the call went out to about 25 CEOs in our local area. What can we do to, better or work in this area? Out of the 25, 5 responded. The 5 we got together, and we ultimately ended up partnering with the Urban League of Portland. And in that, we leaned into with them, not with a solution. We thought we were coming to the table with a solution. We're credit unions. This is the work that we do. But we took a step back from that, and we really had them take us through their client journeys, what was happening to their clientele. And we learned that there were different paths that their clients were on. Ultimately, we want to get their clients to home ownership, but we know that pathway started much earlier. What we found out from this is each of the 5 credit unions had different strengths in this particular area. Some of us had weaknesses in those areas. So not one of us could do this alone. Not one of us could do this work alone. So there's where we've created the specific journeys for their clientele. But then we partnered with a fintech organization, and we're building an app so that their clientele can track their progress through their journeys, whatever segment of the journey they're on, so that we can bring the resources to them. Because what we found from the Urban League was their clients many times started in this journey, but the partner or whoever they were working with would drop the ball, or their client would drop the ball, and this family would ultimately be back in not being served. And we said we really wanted to combat that. So again, I take you through that in that we looked through that journey with the different credit unions, but now partnering with a fintech to help us with the solution that is really working on solving this community issue. So, we take a very close look at those that we partner with. Some we're partnering in with dollars and capital. Some we're partnering in with our resources. We have several resources that we've hired in from outside the credit union industry, so they're adept at looking at how the fintechs are working. And then we have others that we're watching our partners to see what they're doing in that process.
Great. We're going to go next to Kevin. So Kevin is part of the FinTech Solutions team at CUNA Mutual Group. So, Kevin, we'd love to hear, sort of the work that you're doing around, kind of fostering FinTech partnerships with credit unions and sort of the broader strategy of the FinTech Solutions area.
Yeah. It's for me, I am new to the CUNA Mutual organization. My background is entirely financial technology. I've come from some of the large core players, payment players, and others out there. I happen to live in Madison, Wisconsin, and knew of a company called CUNA Mutual Group that was kind of in the news and drove by it periodically, but beyond that, really had no idea of it. And came to the organization through an acquisition of Compliance Systems. And for me, where I sit right now is probably the most passionate and excited that I am for, the direction that we're heading, the work that we're doing. Brian, a lot of your efforts within Ventures is kind of at the forefront, right? Really evaluating a lot of different fintech companies. I think I heard 1,000 a year or something like that. And then ultimately, we're funding and investing in, just a handful. And then out of those, taking some of those fintechs that really align with capabilities that we can bring to our credit union clients and building a distribution path for those. A lot of the focus is on words that we've talked about here today, things like open, right? So it can't just be a conduit to sell more of our insurance products. It's really got to be capabilities that can add value to our credit union clients. We've talked about pivot and change. I think for me, it's a great example of coming into a really large organization that's historically been kind of known for one thing, and how do you shift and pivot and change to adapt to other capabilities. But part of it is, how do you unify both the, credit union system overall, but things that I see as the strengths, right? You've got member trust, you've got lowest cost of funds, but how do you do that in a way that can bring those capabilities to credit unions? I remember a conversation that I had with a credit union leader at a conference like this, and they talked a lot about member trust and things like that, but I was like, well, how do your members know that? Like, how do they know those things? And one of the things, as we talk about kind of the friend or foe model, is don't leave things to assumption, right? If you want your members to know that you do something, you've got to educate and inform them. You've got to bring a capability that supports that. And you can't just leave it to an assumption that they're going to know and understand. That's one of the things that the direct-to-consumer fintechs do a really good job. Paid 2 days early. They just say it right in a commercial, right? And I think sometimes we as an industry rely on the assumption or rely on a presumption. And I think a big part of it is bringing capabilities out that can support it. Can I add on?
Yeah,
I
you
was
certainly
sitting
may.
here and I was thinking more about your question, and you talked about partnership. And I'm going to say something to, I think, most of the folks in the room here, that there's another form of this partnership that is critical to making the whole fintech exercise work. And that is the partnership between the directors and the CEOs, or the volunteers and the staff. And I'm particularly proud of the relationship or the partnership I think that our board has with our CEO, never mind Raj. And honestly, we give our CEO a fair amount of latitude to exercise some discretion when it comes to doing, participating in the fintech environment. Because let's face it, we're the board, right? And I think that's reciprocated in the level of communication and collaboration that our CEO gives to us as a board, of keeping us engaged in the same exercise, right? So I think that's an important part of that whole partnership to make fintechs work.
There's some excellent points. I think the one thing, I would add to, sort of a critical element, I think, to the success or failure of fintechs is really kind of understanding the company and the culture of the fintech companies. We, as Kevin mentioned, have met with now, at least a few thousand fintechs over the last few years, and we really like founders that share sort of the common view of helping be more financially inclusive, and sort of these founders have missions that very much align with the missions of credit unions. And so, I think there's a perception of, these are all people that are just looking to kind of get rich and sell. A lot of these companies are like, hey, I came from a background where, my parents couldn't get access to credit. I'm, maybe a first generation resident in the U.S., and, we basically were overlooked. And so there are more commonalities than we might think. We'll shift gears a bit here. I think we're seeing more credit unions now starting to make investments directly into fintech companies. Also, I know Nick Evans is here from the Circle Fund. They're helping to invest on behalf of credit unions. I'm going to go back to you, Stephen. What is your view in terms of, in making investments in these companies? I think you've made a few, you mentioned. Would love to kind of get your thoughts and advice on credit unions that might be thinking about that.
Great, thank you. So one of the things we've done is we've formed a CUSO with two of our other local credit unions. Actually, the CUSO is called Technological Innovation Alliance. So fancy little name, but it allows us to look at our different fintech partners and decide collectively amongst the three of us, how do we want to invest? And we look at each opportunity. Some we're investing capital, and so when we commit that capital, boy, you do have to have that really close working relationship between the CEO and the board. You look at things completely different than we did 10, 15 years ago. We're bringing to them companies that have never made money. It might be an idea. How much do we want to invest? It is at-risk capital. It's at-risk member money. So we want to know what is the outcome of that, and what is the business case? What is the outcome? And if we don't make it, what will we learn from this that we can apply and continually push this forward? And so we have another process called the Agile process, where we do really look at all of these examples in real time, or each of these case offerings in real time. Second, we may be making some direct financial contributions. And then 3, now we have our teams that are leveraged now with the FinTech and actually development of the product or the service that they're working on. And we get to work with them through the various phases and guide through them. We will find many times they may have an idea, but they don't really know how it applies within the credit union space. And we've seen this, and they just go off and develop, and then they bring it back to us, and we say, no, that's not it. You don't understand our credit union space. Let us join together with you in this co-development, and let's really apply what it is in the credit union space that we need. What is it that our members really need, so that we can really develop a solution in that process. And so that, I'll say, some of it is actually dollar amounts that we're investing capital. Some of it is our time that we're investing. And then others is, again, we're bringing along others within our space to help fund these. And then we're looking out there. There are still struggles and needs by our members or our communities that aren't being fulfilled by products and services in our industry, or by some of the fintechs. So how can we leverage that and work on those solutions? So we have a couple of those. So it's really it's a lot of work. It's not for those that don't have the time to do it. You've got to find the time to do it and put that into the process.
Yeah, Steve, I want to just, I think emphasize the point of, sort of this concept of innovation is something you actually have to work at, to get good at. And it's sort of a muscle that needs to be developed. You just don't start partnering with fintechs and maybe have immediate success. And I know even from within our organization, we really kind of embarked on, embracing sort of this technology, and there's a learning curve that we went through, just as everyone else does. And I think for credit unions that are maybe sitting on the sidelines, it's going to take a couple of years to get things really right and honed in. And if you again, every day you wait, every month you wait, you're falling kind of actually a few years behind kind of where things are going, because it is a learned skill. Paul, maybe the same question in terms of, as a board member, do you have any views around actually making investments in the fintech companies out there, and any thoughts you can share with board members?
I think that the first starting point is kind of the big question: what about risk appetite, right? That's the starting point. How much risk are you willing to take, recognizing that some succeed, some marginally succeed, and not everything succeeds. We've taken an approach that we've made investment in a fintech pool, to see where that will take us, and give us an opportunity to keep our eye on on the environment. And then we similarly made other investments in direct opportunities, because we believe in their mission, and we think that that's what's good for our business and what's good for our members. Time will tell how all of those things turn out, and whether we made good decisions on our risk approach or not. I think that's it.
Kevin, you're probably making personal investments in fintech, so I might ask a different question. You've been in the industry a long time, with respect to working in financial technology. What have you seen works, and maybe what doesn't work when it comes to credit unions working with different financial technology companies?
Yeah, I think two things that become impactful right away. Thing number one is, because of the amount of fintechs that are out there, just understanding, what strategy, what are you looking to accomplish, right? How do you start to narrow the focus in from 10,000 into something that is valuable for the credit union. But you talked about it with risk, right? I think it's understanding, it's not just risk, I would say it's the adaptability to recognize that it may or may not work out. I think partnering with organizations that want to partner with you is hugely impactful, right? It's kind of getting out of the mode of trying to partner with people that really don't want to partner. And Brian, I think you all do a great job from the venture side, is just looking at folks that actually want to partner. And even you talked about it a little bit on, can you help influence? Can you help guide, right? Can you understand and break down the natures of the credit union business against somebody that's built out a technology and a capability, and how do you start to align those things? But I would say, strategy and, risk acceptance would probably be the first two things that I would come into that mix with, so you don't set yourself up for, expectations that aren't going to be met, or if something happens, you're not then immediately disconnecting and say, hey, we tried it once, we're all set, we're done.
Stephen, you've have experience now working and partnering with fintechs. It's not always just red roses and rainbows and things go smoothly. When challenges do arise, how do you work through those challenges? And what advice would you have to credit unions to get through maybe the rockier times of these partnerships?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. And maybe I started with that, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There are those in this space that don't have genuine interests. They are there looking for that profit motive and to spin that. So we spend a lot of time right up front working with a potential fintech partner, really getting to understand their management team, their philosophy, how well aligned are we, and that's where we put this into this kind of risk model for that particular company. We may not invest our capital, we'll invest our time and help them product develop, and we tell them right up front, we're not putting in any of this capital. Now, I will tell you, they come to us at least 8 to 10 times after that and ask us for capital, and you just have to be prepared. No, this is our principle. This is what we were willing to work with you through, this X phase of this product, and yet we're not willing to put capital into that. There's a cost with that as for our time and what we're doing. And then there are others that, we look and they're very well aligned with our mission, our philosophy. They're very engaged. Maybe they're solely working in the credit union space. Those then are where we look to see, okay, we have an opportunity to add additional capital, one, to be in that partner of influence for that products and services, but now this has a more global reach within our credit union ecosystem. I would be remiss to say, prior served on the World Council of Credit Unions, that we also look globally as to what's happening and what are the trends that are happening around the world. We heard just a few moments ago a little bit about open banking. We've been following that very carefully to know that eventually that's going to land here into our system. So what are we doing to prepare ourselves for that from an education standpoint of view, watching the business cases that are happening either in the UK or in Australia, to then say, how are we going to be prepared for these future events? And that's also helping us look at kind of future partners in the fintech space. So it's not just looking here what's happening in our ecosystem, but it's looking around the world and what's happening, and many of them have had very progressive solutions in how they're serving their members of their countries, and that's what we're watching as well.
Before I ask another question, just want to see if there are any questions from audience members. Yes.
I come from the credit union employee, being an entrepreneur of a fintech, and I'm the good side of the good, ugly, and but I've seen, credit unions have a great vendor management, and I was on that side a few years, and we try to squeeze out the blood from the fintech, right? Some of us. So that situation kind of puts the bad. I've seen the bad are more successful working with the credit union than the good who is delivering value. How do you suggest, how can the credit union look at the value that the fintechs are delivering and put that investment and put that interest in them rather than just seeing the initial pitch?
I'll tackle that one. those intangible benefits. And again, I'll go back to, that's a lot of the discussion that we have between myself and the board, my management team and the board, and talking about that, yeah, here's the capital investment, but here's the intellectual investment, and here's the learning opportunity that we're having. This may be successful, but through this process, we're gonna learn something that we're either gonna keep with this, or we're gonna learn something to do it better, differently down the road. So how much are we willing to invest? I can take my staff and I can send them to a conference, spend $40,000, $50,000 sending several to a conference, or I can have them actively engaged with this initiative. They're going to learn from that initiative. It's a $50,000, $75,000 commitment, but now we're going to be able to leverage that going forward in how we're doing that. And I'll go back to our agile process and how we're evaluating things. It was very, very rocky 4 or 5 years ago going through this process. Now the team is meeting every week and deciding what it is that we're going to do next, and they're starting to hone that down.
Yeah, hi, Brian. Nick with Circle. Thanks for your comments. And Steve, I appreciate your approach when you're talking to these fintechs and how you evaluate them. Brian, this question is for you. Or anybody up there, but I had a CUSO holding company president call me the other day, and they're investors. They know how to invest. They're well respected in the space. But the question he asked me, or he said, was, "Hey, I'm getting some pressure from my board, and they want some returns like next year. They want to see some return on their investment." And I said, "Your board members are putting a time limit on return on investment?" He says, "Yeah, I'm getting a lot of pressure." How would you advise that, Brian? And maybe you've heard that before from CEOs and boards in your travels.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's a longer game. When you make investments in fintech companies, these are illiquid investments typically. They're not a public company that is traded, so you can't kind of get in and out of your positions. Yeah, I think the average, kind of time to an exit event is anywhere from 7 to 10 years. So you're really kind of making, developing that relationship, and it's going to last a long time, and you just have to know that. Because I've heard that. I've heard some, it's like, we put that money in 18 months ago. How come we haven't tripled the return and gotten that money back? But that's just not kind of the reality of, and I think part of it too is, if you're looking at investing and Nick knows this, to kind of dabble in it, you kind of do so at your own risk. I mean, we look at, probably in a year close to 1,000 fintechs to decide, maybe the 10 that we're going to invest in. And so we see what works, what doesn't work, and sometimes if you don't have kind of that expertise, it can be kind of dangerous to put money to work unless you're kind of investing alongside others that are, kind of experts in the space. Great.
Yeah, thank you. Paul, you mentioned a while ago that you have several investments in fintechs, and you talked about risk appetite. Just wondering what your objectives are or have been in your investments, and it was interesting to hear some of the dollar numbers. What are some of the amounts that a credit union would expect to invest in different ventures?
Okay, thanks for the question, or questions. I just want to go back to this gentleman's question a moment ago, and I'm just going to copy, I guess, what Kevin said. Yeah, it's about strategy, and in particular, it's about alignment. So there's both the economic question, and then there's the business interests. And to your question, I think our focus is really on what's best for the member. And to keep going with that whole alignment thing, to the extent that we can identify something that we think that is far and above better than the other alternatives, whether it's what we've got or what else we see out there, then that's something we're going to pursue. And in fact, that's how we've made the decision to do a couple of things with people in the room. So that's the way we look at it. I'm hesitant to give you a number about what to expect to invest. I think there's other people. Brian can tell you about specific transactions, I suppose, because the reality is, I think it depends on your credit union. So what might be right for my credit union, and we're $6.5 billion or so, might not be right for your credit union based on your capital budget or your risk appetite or the opportunities that you have in front of you. So I'm not sure if that's helpful, but maybe Brian, you want to talk about specific things and what deals and investment opportunities you have.
Jump in maybe from a credit union perspective, and in this debate we're getting ready to have with our board, and I have my board member here, so he's hearing this debate before we've even brought it to them. But we're roughly putting a number of about 10% of our members' capital is to the limit of where we would invest. Now, we're not there. We're not even close to that number. And this is through QSOs and through fintechs and that number. So it's just kind of giving us a ballpark to say this is the amount of money that we would be willing to put at risk, again, with specific objectives of what we want to return from that risk. Again, it could be learning, it could be a new product or service, it could be partnering with a QSO that's aggregating our costs for debit, credit card transactions. But that gives us a number as to now this is kind of the risk level that we're looking at and how we would invest. And now we can debate that. How do we best spend those dollars to get the best return for our objectives?
Well, great. I know we're at time. My last real quick comment is just, I think the other benefit of these partnerships is that you get, in many cases, access to world-class talent. And we talked a little bit about the Apple Card. We were able to lure the CTO away from Goldman Sachs, and he had been involved in the launch of Marcus, which is our digital bank. He oversaw the launch of the Apple Card. He's now the CEO of one of our portfolio companies. That company is working almost exclusively with credit unions, and he's going to bring basically the knowledge and experience that he has. He wants to build out a very robust API platform. And so that's sort of another benefit of these partnerships. So with that, I want to thank my fellow panelists here, Steve, Kevin, Paul. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you very much. And this is such a great opportunity to remind everybody to make sure that you're networking, you're exchanging cards, you're tapping phones, all those different pieces. So there's so many conversations to continue to have. Our next panel is all about credit. It's time to give credit where credit is due. And it is a conversation that with a bunch of experts that we have, but I want to first bring up our moderator, Cynthia Campbell, who is the Chief Experience Officer at Balance, and she's helping members every single day rebuild. Next, we have Harold Roundtree, who is the CEO at Uncle Credit Union, and he's had exceptional loan growth, both in real estate and in auto, and we'll maybe kind of have the perspective of some risk-based pricing and how to reach people. Next, we have Selfa Saucedo, and she is the board of director at Ventura County Credit Union, and she has an interesting perspective on demographics and societal trends. And finally, we have Scott LaSalle, Saertec GDS Link, and he in FinTech is a founder, a board member, and really will talk to us about the power of analytics. Should I just stand right in front of her? Does that make it better? Next time I can go around. Please turn it over to Cynthia. Take us away.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Brandy, Sue, and Zach. Credit's got to be one of my favorite topics. I work for Balance. It's a national nonprofit, 53 years old, and we work with about 300 credit unions to be their outsourced financial counselors. So we're working on budgets and credit scores, a big topic these days, student loans, first-time home buyers, getting out of debt, all of those things. So when I saw the credit conversation and my wonderful panelists, I thought this is going to be fun. What's great about being on the second day is you have so many people that have gone before you have said these really cool snippets of information about the topic. And so, there's some things that we can dive into a little bit. And one of them, yesterday, there was 2 or 3 panelists who talked about the FICO score not being unbiased, right? Being biased against minorities minorities and why it shouldn't be the only thing we hang our hat on, but it is a big thing we hang our hat on, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. After I heard that comment, I did a little research. The Center for Responsible Lending has been quoted as saying, credit scores are reflective of the history of discrimination in this country. There's a whole book out that says, it's called The Algorithms of Oppression, and it's all about the FICO score and that other algorithms that are part of the oppressive situation. So I think there's a couple of things. First, I was wondering, how many of you are on FICO 8? Anybody know? Raise your hand if you know. It's the most popular model out there. It's the one that most FIs are on, but there's a FICO 9. There's FICO 10, and those FICO 9s and 10s add things like rental history. They make medical debts less, counted in the score. So there are ways to be more inclusive if you're using that score by just getting on the most current model so that it's the most fair model for your members. But certainly there's a lot of other things we can do, right? And we heard about QCash that can give a member a loan in 60 seconds or less, and it doesn't use a credit score at all. It uses like a member score and how they behave with your institution. So my illustrious panel here, thank you all for joining me. The question posed on the brochure was really, how can credit unions be more inclusive? We're still using the FICO score, right? And how can we use it? What other things can we be using in addition to the score to make sure we're being as inclusive as possible? Just like to open it up for first rounds of comments. Would like to start?
I'll start on the first piece there. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Everyone, are we in agreement on that? Okay. So for Uncle Credit Union, what is Uncle, man from Uncle, what does it stand for? Let's get that out of the way. University of California, Livermore employees, the folks that work with the nuclear arsenal to make sure it works on old weaponry, if you have to use it. No, not a popular topic here, but about 8,000 people doing that kind of thing. So one of the things when I said what stays in Vegas, for us that we discovered, we were on FICO 3. And we had been on that model for about, double digits, we'll say. That's what we want to say. So I would encourage people to go back. We were always out of alignment as we worked with some of the dealers. We worked through CU Direct, and we were having these battles about buying paper and the like. And so I think that that's going to be very, very important to make sure that you're on the right model. And then the other things that I think that is important for credit unions when it comes to, a lot of people in different communities don't trust financial institutions as a whole. I can always remember my mom and dad, they were from the great generation, and they actually had a deed-burning party when they paid off their mortgage. They just didn't like credit as a whole, coming from the community that lived at different times and just didn't trust it. So I think it's going to be a lot of education about the value of credit for different communities, other than just a FICO score, and making sure you have the most recent model. My career, I worked at World Savings many, many years ago. That was a $125 billion bank. S&L, they stopped calling themselves a bank, and then they became an S&L. They were sold to Wachovia, I think, in 2006. They did exclusive B-grade paper for loans. I think someone talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, having a home and the like. Within different communities. In the African American community, home ownership is down in the low 40s. So you have to have those kinds of programs that sort of make sense. I think I saw Joan here. She's a member of FHLB San Francisco. If you work with that organization, they're doing things for first-time home buyers where you can partner with that organization or some of the organizations you work with that might promote the basics of home ownership and the like. So those are some of the things, a little bit of this, a little bit of that people that have been out there doing it a long, long time ago, long before fintechs, way back in the 90s. Imagine doing B-grade home loans, portfolio lender, and they did it pretty well. So it's funny, there was even a movie star that had, sort of marginal credit, but they always paid their bills. When they were on television doing their jokes, I always remembered that movie star. But so it happens across different phases of life.
Well, caused you to change your credit score model after double-digit years? What was the final thing that made you go ahead and do that?
We have boots on the ground. We have a gentleman that calls on our car dealers, and he would be coming back and saying, you know what, you've got this score, and they have this score, and we just sort of got tired of it. And so I think that was a time to make a change. You still have those arguments. We partner with the fintech here, Alchemy. We made a very challenging decision to go to a new digital platform. And with that, we got Savvy Money out of that piece where you're a much more robust experience when it comes to credit. Before, we used to use a little dot map. We'd take our little quarterly FICO scores, and that's all we shared with the membership. But now that becomes a much more robust conversation. But the issue was we just got tired of all the bantering back and forth.
I love the mention of the fintech Savvy Money. You know, if you don't have something like Savvy Money, they're probably using Credit Karma, who have been pushing your members to Discover cards for 20 years, right? So Credit Karma is out there, and they're offering things to your members that are not you. So Savvy Money allows you to offer them your items. So let's talk to you, Selfa, about the FICO score and how your credit union, you're on the board of a credit union. What are you doing to make lending more inclusive?
Well, I'm going to approach this from a slightly different perspective. Yes, I am a board member, and yes, I am still learning about fintechs and everything that's been talked about today. And frankly, to be up here after all of the previous speakers is a little bit intimidating. So forgive me if I stutter a little bit. I am actually first and foremost a public health professional, and so the pandemic really exposed the inequities that exist in our communities. We've always known that communities of color have been disproportionately burdened historically, and the pandemic just really exposed those inequities. And in the public health setting, we rushed to try to accommodate and reach those populations that were being most impacted. And we realized that there was a need to really meet people where they were, and to really understand their situation, and to really understand where they were coming from, because it's not easy. You cannot treat people the same way every individual. We all know that our prime borrowers, they get better credit, housing, even career opportunities. Our subprime borrowers are subjected, and in certain cases, I would say punished for with higher credit cards, mortgages, higher interest mortgages, and our ability as a credit union to try to serve both is going to be stretched, and never has it been more visible as now with the pandemic. We understand that Maslow's hierarchy of need in public health, we look at the social determinants of health. Social determinants of health show us that individuals are a product of their lived experiences, right? So individuals who, social determinants of health, for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, when I first heard it, I was a little bit intimidated, mean all of the conditions in which people live, learn, work, play, pray, and age. And all of those conditions impact an individual's ability to access services, to improve their condition in life. And that goes for economic stability. Economic stability is one of the key pillars of an individual's ability to be healthy, a community's ability to be healthy. And if we're trying to improve our membership's financial health, we have to approach it from the perspective of, what am I offering my field of membership, my members? Do I know my field of membership? Do I have people within my institution who can speak to the condition of the field of membership? Am I really making an effort? In Ventura County, the Board of Supervisors adopted a racism as a public health crisis. And with that came learning. Our Board of Supervisors had to really consider what we were doing as an institution, as a county. We employ over 10,000 county members and county employees, and we had to consider what we were going to do differently if we really were committed to addressing racism in our county. And one of the things that as a result of that, we created a council of all the departments in our county to address the issue of racism in our county. And one of the things that we identified was that if we were really committed to addressing this, we were going to throw resources at it. So the question about what do we need to do to be more inclusive in this arena to truly reach our communities and especially those communities who need our help the most. And it boils down to having resources to support those efforts. Without exception, all of the departments that were part of this council, DEI council, we concluded that we can't do this work if we don't have a resource within our own department to help us know our community, to understand our community, and to understand their lived experience. So if we're wanting to reach our community, we need to have a resource within our own institution that tells us this is the community, this is what your community needs, this is how they need it. They are their immigrant population, indigenous population, they're young workers, hard workers, good savers, but the FICO scores don't reflect that and don't support their efforts to get ahead in life because they don't have enough credit history, because they don't have any savings history. Perhaps the immigrant population, the indigenous, they don't have a bank history because they don't bank. They don't bank in their country and they don't bank here. One of the reasons why they don't bank is because they distrust the system. They don't trust banks. Somebody said that earlier. It's very true. They don't trust banks. And for the most part, if we as board members don't know the difference between a credit union and a bank, you can bet your bottom dollar that immigrant populations don't know those differences either. So how we treat them, how we make them feel when they walk through our doors, or how we reach out to them is how we do it needs to be reflective of the way they need to be treated. So one last thing before I forget, I wanted to just leave you with the thought that if we want to treat people equally, we need to treat them differently. And that means that you need to understand the community that you're working with and their needs.
Wow, thank so much there to unpack. I think, Sue, if you're in the room, we could put this down for another panel, the connection between health and wealth and the social determinants of health, because there are so many things credit unions can do to affect those social determinants of health. The biggest one is housing. Think about it. If you have an unhealthy home, mold or pests, all of that affects your health. Health means you can't go to school, which means you can't learn, which means you can't get a great job. It's just like this cycle that continues. So I love the health wealth connection, and having you come from public health to a credit union board is brilliant because health and wealth go together. Scott, tell us a little bit about what you're doing. I know that you work with credit scores and you help credit unions use the score and models to uncover lending opportunities. Can you tell us how you're inclusive?
Sure. So first, let me give you a little bit of my background. I won't bore you. I've got a master's in statistics. I started as a modeler. I'm on the board of a fintech. I'm chairman of the credit committee. So I think I know a little bit about the topic. So first, let's do math in public, which is always a scary thing and embarrasses people. All right. So I'm talking FICO 09 here, which is used with Experian data, not FICO 08. This is close. A 580 to a 620 FICO. What are the loss rates there? The odds are 4 to 1. That means you got 4 goods and 1 bad. So everyone in here at a credit union would say, oh my gosh, I'm not touching a 580 to a 620. That's so bad. But you're saying no to 4 good members. Does that make sense to you? You can drive a truck through that. Now, let's talk about laziness. A 720 FICO and above. You got odds of 33 to 300 to 1. So on average, 60 to 1. That's why everybody does the boring. FICO is not credit policy. FICO is not a credit model. So I look at it this way. It is a tool that you can use. It is something that was built, and it fits 80% of the population. Sort of like our educational system, right? It doesn't, let's be honest, it doesn't fit the tails of the population. And who's in the tails? Immigrants, lower educated people, minorities, whatever it is, that don't have credit. FICO is built on thickness of your credit file. Well, if you only have 40% home ownership in the African American community, they won't have a thick file. That doesn't mean they can't pay bills and they shouldn't get credit. right? So stop using FICO in those segments. So we have built tons of models. People are talking about open banking. Open banking has many definitions, just like fintechs. 10,000 fintechs, don't get me started. Open banking is using bank transaction data, the deposit data you have. So we've built tons of models on populations that are under 660 FICO, and you can find populations, they pay their bills, they're very good. But guess what? They have thin credit. A common trap of credit card issuers is to give new credit entrants, people to the population, $500 credit limits. We all know this, right? As soon as you're 30% utilized on your credit card, your score drops like a rock. So they trap them that way, so no one will look at them. And your FICO score is used to give you insurance, to rent an apartment, to buy a car. So credit unions can beat them at this game. So I was CMO at Springleaf One Main. Branch-based lender, 28% lender. Average FICO, 600. We did a budget, we had a 3 to 5% loss rate, right? And every credit union in here should not be letting them do loans in your market, because 10% of that rate goes to pay for the branch, just to have a branch. Their cost of funds, they don't have what you have. They don't have a low cost of funds. They have to securitize. They pay 4 to 5% for their money. You pay 1 or less or 2. So you can beat them at their own game if you underwrite differently. FICO isn't the tool to use on these populations, right? And neither is if you pay your cell phone. I've never seen that actually come in. Everyone likes to talk about that. Right. But you've got the bank transaction data. You have the core. You know, you have their deposits. That's such rich data. So I'll shut up there.
That's really great. And it kind of touches on a conversation we started yesterday, right? About predatory lending and payday lenders and how there's more of them than McDonald's in the United States. And we talked about kicking them out, right? But I hope we don't kick them out until we have an alternative program for them. And until we're willing to reach down in that credit score area, we kind of don't, right? So taking away their only product wouldn't really work for them. You know, yay, we get the predators out, but now they have no place to go. So how do we get there? How do we lend to people responsibly that have these low scores? Is it through education and getting them there? Is it through taking a risk? Like, how do we reach them? I think QCash is great. It's for current members. What about the non-members? How do we get them? Could we talked about big data. Could we use big data to find out which of our members, and may I say employees, are using payday lending, and then go after them? So let's talk about data. Do you use data to try to find the people in your space that need the help, you know, with their credit scores? Or how do you help them move up the ladder so that your next loan is less expensive for them?
Yeah, I'd like to, I guess, maybe approach it again from a different perspective. Data used correctly and used appropriately, and good data will definitely reveal important information. But data that is, for example, the FICO scores, they use one of the pillars, of course, is the history, right? The payment history. Well, that tends to tie people, chain people to their history, to you know, difficult moments in their life where they have been unable to get past, you know, to survive. So they've done things that perhaps weren't wise. So the problem with FICO scores in terms of the populations that I'm working with, that I'm thinking about, is that it chains them to their past behaviors. It doesn't consider the fact that they have matured, they have employment, they have education, perhaps they have a lot more grounding in their community, and so they're much more of a community member now. So that is one area where I think that the FICO scores and how we are using credit scoring systems to identify our membership, you know, whether they're good, bad, you know, excellent credit risk. I think we have to be open up to other options. And I know that I'm not too familiar with all of the different FICO. I didn't realize there were so many. I think somebody said there was over 60 or something. And so I'm not terribly familiar with all of them, but it seems to me that they're all private credit scoring systems. So much like the U.S. Post Office, perhaps having a public credit scoring systems would be something that would be worth considering. I'm not sure how that goes over with this crowd, but I'm throwing it out there. Because the communities that are most in need in our county are counting on us to be able to see them where they are. And if we're only seeing our prime borrowers, and we are discounting or disregarding the credit invisible population, we're discounting a large portion of our population. population, those communities of color in our community that are credit invisible. We're discounting them. In Ventura County, we are about 45% Latino, 45% white in our county. We have a very small Black and very small Asian. So the work that we do in public health has been focused on that community. But there's all kinds of growing communities, and we need to look at the way we are helping them get credit in order to establish themselves in the community.
What I keep hearing from you is the medical model of treating the whole person. You know, the medical model is about treating the whole person. And what if we followed that model in the financial space, right? And looked at the whole person.
Well, actually, I should say that public health is about prevention. We are not the medical model. Medical model is treating the person after they are already sick. Public health is about
keeping them healthy,
preventing them from getting sick.
Thank you for clarifying that. Gentlemen, would you like to add anything else?
Well, I think, you go back to it. We've all grown up with the 3 C's of credit. What is it? Collateral, capacity, and character. And so we're talking about FICO. And, FICO was invented, by Fair Isaac over in Marin County all those years ago, and now everybody uses it. That's a heavy weighting on the character component. And so then you've got collateral, and a lot of people like collateral because you don't lose as much money on it, supposedly. And capacity is jobs or your ability to pay. So I think that what people have to learn, it's sort of like on the commercial side of the business. If you've ever done commercial lending, you used a RMA as to look at what others were in the various touch points. And so I think you have to do more storybook lending. That's really what it's all about. And you have to sort of lay out you've got all those 700s that you mentioned. Make that an automated kind of decision. Don't spend your time on having an underwriter to underwrite and feel all good about it. You just get it done. And then you pick a spot, hopefully a very low spot, of what you're not going to do. And that gives you more time to work with people that might have the dents and dings that are in there, and you're doing more of the storybook lending. My challenge with credit unions, and I know we're talking to a national audience here, is that I think credit unions, you think about CRA, where it come into place back in '77. It's a bad word in our industry. But banks someone had to put a gun to their head to say, go back into those communities to lend. And I always remember Lisa worked at a credit union, San Mateo Credit Union, East Palo Alto, one of the toughest areas around a long time ago. I used to go there and get my hair cut when I had hair, but but nobody wanted to go to East Palo Alto. Right across the freeway, Palo Alto, one of the pristine areas. You couldn't find a bank, you couldn't find a credit union in that marketplace. And I think Barry Gillette put a branch in there. It's old school, but you create a physical presence. And many credit unions, many in this room here, passed on that kind of deal. We've done a couple of mergers here recently, and you hear people, you're being predatory, lending, merging, those kinds of things. It's in a similar kind of environment out in Stockton. Stockton was a town that went bankrupt. Oh my God, why would you want to go to Stockton? That was board members, that was employees. But that's where a lot of the activity is happening, because the folks that live in the Tri-Valley of Pleasant and Livermore and Dublin, they're all running around these $2 million homes in the area. They don't need any money, but people in Stockton, they do. But you still hear, well, why would you go and do that? And that story is the case in a lot of areas. I've grown up in the Bay Area most of my life, so I can't speak for the nation, but places like Richmond are challenging areas. You see things like Oakland, oh God, I might get shot, I don't want to be in that area. But you don't see a lot of financial institutions, banks or credit unions there. And I'm not saying to go out there and build a 5,000 square foot mausoleum in that location, but maybe it's a loan facility so that when people do have questions with all the technology, that you have somewhat of a physical presence. And if you can't build a physical presence, then become engaged in some of the community of activities that are there, so that you can be there and just be a physical presence for such, because people, there is that distrust, and it's all about presence. Thank you.
I love that term, storybook lending. I'm definitely stealing that one. Scott, would you like to add anything before we open it up?
Yeah, the last thing I'd say is to echo your point. Everybody, I think a lot of the credit unions focus on a one-size-fits-all underwriting for your customer, your member base, and you have one product fits all. Well, guess what? Microloans are great for starting small businesses in communities, right? $100, $500, doing those loans. But I bet you they don't occur to you. You're doing a personal loan for $6,000 or $10,000, or a credit card with a $10,000 limit, a mortgage, a HELOC. You have to look at the population and go, you're serving this population. All right, it's not working down here. What will work there? People have different needs, have different income. Everyone's not like you. And market research is called looking in the mirror, right? Where you think everyone's like you. You can't do that, right? Because they're not. They're not all bald white guys like me or like you, right? And that's how we build products for the members and our footprints, right? So not one size fits all.
Well, I thought we were a lot alike right here, right?
Yeah.
Well, you're
no.
We'd love to open it up for questions for our
May I
panelists.
may I just add one more
Oh, sure,
piece?
sure, of
Just about,
course.
I don't know if Erin Mendez is in the room, but she talked about financial well-being, and that really caught me, because I think the one group that you have to start with is your own employees in the credit unions. We're asking people, I think you mentioned you have some financial wellness experts that are out in the community. But I have to be honest with you, I'm not quite so sure that our employees, we consider ourselves a moderate employer. We're not a Google or a Meta where these people are having all these different stock options. And some of the employees right in your own room might be having their challenges. And so that is what I would recommend, that you take stock of some of the folks that are there. As a CEO, and I came up on the lending side. I'm not and that's where I came through, looking at our employee credits and doing that storybook lending, bending just a little bit where it makes sense on those 3 C's might not be a bad idea. That's the last comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going to open it up now. Does have any questions?
I would love Frank to just repeat a stat
Sure.
he just said to me.
There's, you can see it CU Today if you want to search it. We reported it. PSCU research shows 60% of credit union employees consider themselves financially stressed.
Right, they're no different basically than the general public, and that's hard to hear, isn't it? Because we're also expecting them to talk to our members. So starting at home starts like a good place to start, yeah. So opening it up, certainly when you ever heard that thing, if you're the smartest person in the room, find a different room, right? I don't have that problem. The brain trust in this room is so strong, not only on this panel, but all the panels. I just, thanks again for all of that. And if you'd like to ask any questions of this panel, now would be the time. Or add anything to the topic.
We don't use FICO to make a decision. I do like to think that we do some storybook lending, but I think one of the things that we are a little concerned about is if we want to use different rules for different people, we have to worry about fair lending. And so I think that kind of holds us back a little bit, at least on the pricing side. So we'll make the loan to you, but we use Vantage, not FICO, but we do price it based on the score. So I'm just a little bit concerned about, what do you guys think about getting into trouble with fair lending if you're using other things to make decisions for people?
From y'all first.
I think you're spot on. I think FICO is the constant on the pricing on the loan. So I think you stay there. I think it's not a bad idea that once that loan is made, and I am certainly not saying that we are doing this, why not go back and look at that individual 12 to 18 months down the road and try to provide some additional favorable pricing, if you would. But I think you can continue to use FICO as your pricing tool. I think our panel is more about, looking at different ways of how to grant credit.
Turn that around, because I've actually done pricing at Chase, Barclays, a lot of banks. I look at the loss rate. You got a risk tier, A through H, 1 through 10, 1 through 20. It has a loss rate that your models have calculated, and you price according to that, the risk and the volatility and the return you need. So I would step away from, for fair lending, you're trying to assess the risk of different populations and separate the goods from the bads. So if you use different data, as long as there's not implicit bias in the data, right? Obviously, we have implicit bias and explicit bias. So if we're using traditional credit bureau data to underwrite a segment of population, think of in credit cards, we would do thick file and thin file models. And there's FICO scores for that. If you got a thin file population, you would have a different risk model for them. There's no fair lending issue with that because you can't rely on the fact that they don't have 10 years of credit history. What if it's a new immigrant, it's a H-1B visa, who could be making $150,000 as a coder, right? And you're going to say, I'm not going to give that person credit? That makes no sense. So I think it's the data you use, and I do pricing based on risk tier. Just go to like Lending Club when you used to be able to buy the loans. A through H. A's were like less than 1% loss rate, and they're priced a certain way. So that takes it away, and that also takes the power away from FICO. I think FICO's a little bit like diamonds. So, you know.
Anything to add, Selva?
Yeah, I'd like to say that you mentioned data. If you use biased data as your gauge, then you're going to perpetuate bias. So what I would suggest a combination. Obviously, I don't know all of the legalities, so I'm not even going to attempt to do that. I'm just going to have you look at your communities where in Ventura County, for example, we have small businesses who have been there for ages, for years. They are the hub of their community. Communities relied on them during the pandemic to help them overcome, food insecurity, to overcome issues of credit. And so looking at your community businesses and how good they have maintained over the years. So using not just FICO, but using other and data, of course, data that's key. But I like your idea of checking in with them and seeing where they are in their repayment, in their improved credit. Just in terms of other additional credit. Those are some of the things that come to mind. I don't pretend to address all of the issues that you face as an institution, but from the community perspective, there are people out there who have a long history of paying back or paying their rent, paying their bills, paying their credit, and nobody wants to take a chance on them because they don't have it on the books anywhere. So knowing your community and having that person within your institution, those individuals within your institution, and that could be your employees who know their community because they live in your community, is having them weigh in on your policies, your strategies, your what you do to gain your customers and gain their trust, because that, I think, is key. And I think people have mentioned it before on this panel, the importance and value that trust brings to the table.
Thank you so much. And we are at time, unfortunately, because we could go on and on about credit. But thank you, Harold and Scott and Selva. Thank you all for your time.
All right, it is time for the much anticipated panel of the day. It's time for us to talk about all the things you got into last night. And by that, I mean gambling and weed and cryptocurrency. Did anybody get into that? No? Okay, a couple of you did. We're going to talk a little bit about crypto. We're going to talk about the risks that come with sports betting, it would come with marijuana-related businesses. And our experts today, first we have a moderator, Miss Amber Harson. She's the CEO of Prodigy, and she is knowledgeable, a little feisty sometimes, and she brings informed, strategic challenge thinking. Next, I'm going to invite Todd Lane, who is the CEO of Cal Coast Federal Credit Union, and he will help us understand potentially the approach to crypto, I'm hoping. And Michael Maxwell, Board of Director at SCE Federal Credit Union, has some insight on apps for sports betting. And then Robert Craig, CEO of PayQuick, is helping credit unions with marijuana-related businesses and how we can work with those businesses in a safe and secure way. So please, Amber, take it away.
Thank you, everyone. So we've talked a lot over the course of the last day and a half or so about payments and fintech and money movement, and we get to talk about really all of them, so it's kind of nice we get to help wrap those all together. money is moving faster and faster, right? Payments, how we exchange money between people is moving faster and faster every single day. And we talked just a little bit this morning, Todd from Co-op was sharing some stats around Venmo and PayPal. And I'll give some personal experience to that. I'm a member of 6 credit unions in 3 different states, Utah, Colorado, and California. I manage a competitive sports team comprised of 200 children and all of their parents. The CEO of a Core is much easier, just so you know. And I run that entire business on Venmo because my credit unions, none of the 6 of my credit unions actually have the infrastructure that allows that money to move to us for me to be able to manage that business as effectively as I can via Venmo. So we know that money is changing the way we work as consumers as well as commercially, right? That's more on the business side of things, and I'm running those platforms via different technology. And so as we see those things happening, we're also starting to see some pivots. As credit unions, I think we waited a little bit too long to respond to some of that. When I think about the fact that none of those 6 credit unions have Zelle, which would have been an appropriate alternative for me to use, we kind of missed the boat. And so now that's already embedded into our society. It's just a normal part of culture for us to use those platforms. Well, what's coming next? Well, what we're starting to see a lot of trending around, in my opinion, is going to be the money movement that is originating out of what might have been considered counterculture at one point in time. If you think about cannabis banking, right? That's always been viewed, or not always, it has historically been viewed as a subculture or a counterculture to typical society. Same thing with gambling and betting. It's been hidden in back alleys. Vegas has like a whole reputation around what happens when things go wrong when you bet and you end up in a hole in a desert. But it's becoming more mainstream. What was that? Yeah, well, I tried to stay away from that because there was the reset. I felt like that was a little fresh, but and then crypto. Crypto has been really considered a subculture or a counterculture of money movement for years from a privacy perspective and personal freedoms and all those things. And so now they're starting to, well, some of us would argue that cannabis is mainstream. I don't think we can count that as counterculture in my opinion anymore. But crypto and sports betting and other online internet gambling are starting to creep more into the mainstream too. And those are all forms of money movement. So as credit unions, as these are racing and barreling down upon us, the question for this panel really has been, do we continue to wait and see, which is sort of what we did with the Venmos and the Zales and the PayPal of the world, or is it time to go all in? So take it away, sirs. What do you think?
You know, I love the thought that I'm part of a counterculture. I mean, I don't want it to go mainstream, so I'm going to talk a little bit about crypto, but I'm going to start out by asking you a couple of questions, and I think I know what the answer is, but I want to see sort of the response. So raise your hand if you've been to a credit union conference or any conference where there's been a breakout session on crypto. All right, the entire room. All right, here's the second question. How many of you personally were convinced by that presentation and actually invested in crypto? Okay, so maybe a third of the room. That's actually more than I thought. So most of you have not been convinced that crypto should be a part of your life, part of your portfolio, part of your investment portfolio, retirement portfolio. And that's very common. The stats show that, and I'm going to go over the stats in a bit. But I'm going to make a case that, and nobody else has been largely successful in doing this, and I will probably fail as well, but I'm going to go old school on you guys and try and make a case for why you need to be invested or have some exposure to crypto. I do. I invested in a Bitcoin ETF, and they invest in futures. It's a Bitcoin futures ETF. I see some head shaking, so I think others have done that as well. It's interesting, very interesting. And I'm going to make a case for your exposure, and I'm not an investment advisor, so just please take this with a grain of salt. I'm going to make a case for your exposure to crypto ought to be between 1% and 5% of your total investment portfolio. So I'm going to try and do that. I think also, you know, credit unions should be playing a role in crypto. And we see various credit unions doing different things. For my credit union, we are providing education. We're not quite all in yet. We're helping them avoid the fraud that we often see in crypto. We're educating them about the risk in crypto. And I'll talk a little bit about those risks. And then we talked yesterday about blockchain. And I'm not going to spend much time on it today, but our credit union thinks that blockchain is transformative. It's going to transform our business and every other business in the world. And we are watching it very closely. It's actually moving slower than we thought it was going to move, but we are keeping a watchful eye on that. So back to the stats on crypto. It is primarily a young person's game, and it's primarily males, young males, not young females, but young males. The 18 to 26 age group, 33% of US citizens have invested in crypto. Actually, that's worldwide. And men, it's 50% of that 18 to 26. Now, the numbers go down significantly after that. 30 to 49, 21%. And then my age category, and I think some of you, looking at things like hair color and the lack of hair in some cases, it was pointed out earlier, in the 50 to 64 year age group, it's only 8%, okay? So it is not mainstream yet. It's talked about mainstream. You cannot open or read a Wall Street Journal without reading about some story about crypto or some company that's involved in crypto. But it's not mainstream. It's not a mainstream investment just yet. So when you hear about the risk of crypto, you hear about market manipulation, business and commercial failure. You hear about regulatory intervention, and I know the NCUA is, sort of pushing us in that direction. You hear about rogue custodians, lost passwords, compromised wallets, hacked SIM cards, fat-fingered trades, 51% attacks. Everybody familiar with 51% attacks? That's an attack on the blockchain. It's happened before with Ethereum and a couple other cryptos. And then even plain old everyday scams. And that's what's happening at our credit union. All right, so here's my case for investing in crypto. Back in our college days, perhaps even in high school, we all heard about something called modern portfolio theory. Everybody familiar with that? It's very old school. It was invented in the 50s, 1952. And what modern portfolio theory said, and you ought to revisit it if you haven't looked at it in years, but what modern portfolio says is that if you own a single asset, a single investment, your risk is high, very high. If you own two assets equally, and they are both positively correlated, meaning they move in the same direction as markets move, you might as well just own one asset. You haven't reduced your risk. So buying or adding an investment that is positively correlated to what you already own creates more risk, okay? If you own an asset or add a second asset that is negatively correlated, you have done what? You've reduced your risk, right? Very simple theory. Now think about a third asset. So adding a third asset to your portfolio, like crypto. Crypto is the riskiest of all assets, but adding the riskiest of all assets to your portfolio, in the case of crypto, actually reduces your overall risk. Now, how could that be? Data shows that crypto is not correlated in any way. It's negatively correlated to every other type of asset. So by adding the riskiest asset to your portfolio, you're going to reduce your risk. And you're going to increase your return because it's the riskiest of all assets. Anybody convinced? You are. All right. There's some success right there. It's true. Check it out. If you work with an investment advisor, talk to that investment advisor about modern portfolio theory and how adding cryptocurrency or exposure to cryptocurrency will actually reduce your risk. It works out. The numbers work out. So the role that credit unions ought to play in crypto. As I mentioned, we are not quite there yet. We have done lots of education with our members. We have online education. We put it on our newsletter. We do alerts to them about fraud scams related to crypto. And the reason we have not made that next step in partnering with somebody, and I think some credit unions perhaps in this room have partnered with companies like NYDIG, we are concerned about the sustainability of those organizations that stay in the crypto space. We're not sure how to measure and assess whether or not they have any sustainability. And in fact, we had been talking with NYDIG. You probably saw last week they laid off a third of their employees. Their CEO and many executives are gone. They've been replaced. That sort of thing concerns us. So keep a watchful eye on potential partners in that space. We think we need to be there. You've seen all the stats in terms of your membership and the money moving out of your credit union to buy crypto. It's going to continue. Purchasing crypto is very easy to accomplish. So anyways, that's where we are.
Great. Crypto is here to stay. You know, it's also here to stay, sports betting. Sorry. And to be fair, I'm not up here as a board of director. I'm taking that hat off. I'm putting on my investor hat because I have made an investment in a sports betting app. My buddy started it. Him and I talk all the time about it. We get it, right? I see a lot of similarities between sports betting and cannabis, frankly, as far as the way it's kind of going through the U.S., right? Except for there's one main difference. Federally, it is not illegal to sports bet. There's no law in the books on the federal level saying that you can't sports bet. So now 36 states have passed sports betting laws. California is not one of them. California won't be one of them, from what I'm hearing. Both those props are attacking each other, and so we'll have to wait another cycle to be in California. But it's here to stay. You know, in 2019, 1 trillion peer-to-peer payments for sports gambling, for sports betting, right? So you can say your members aren't doing it, but I can tell you your members are doing it. You know, you look at Europe, you look at Asia, right? It's just part of their culture, and it's coming to the US. You look on ESPN, hey, on that bottom line, oh, the Packers are -4.5 favorites, and it's from -110, and the spread's 35, right? It's over-unders 35. You see it everywhere, right? So can't really be morality police about that when it's just an everyday, culture there. But we also need to be protective of our members, right? I talked to my buddy and I said, what can credit unions do? What can banks do better? What can you do better to support you? Right? He said, open up your system so at least allow that transaction to go through. Right? Instead of declining and having to call and say, what are we doing? He's like, just put that vendor code in and just let us do that transaction to actually help get that money there. Because what's going to happen is they're going to move that money into a crypto account, and then that crypto account's going to go to there, and it's just going to be kind of even more messy, right? Instead of being that frictionless transactions, right? And then the other side of this, right, is, I asked him, I'm like, so he just got a certification, he can just start taking deposits. And I go, how many options do you have to bank? And he goes, 2. And I go, fees really high? He goes, yep. And I'm not going to disclose those fees because he kind of told me, but I'm like, so there's actually opportunities for a lot of these startups. There are many startups in the sports gambling business that really could use help. Right? I look at cannabis companies similarly, they need help too, and it is a cash business. So I don't want to necessarily be that closed-minded to sports gambling anymore. It is here to stay. It is going to be legal in all 50 states at some point, 5 years, 10 years down the road. But there's also opportunities here for you to partner with potentially one of your members who's started an app or done something else in that space and not be afraid of taking that money anymore.
Here to stay, definitely.
So.
We've been gambling since the age of money, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So, and you're right about California. It's not probably going to go there in this election cycle. So Bob Craig, I'm the CEO of PayQuick. We have recently announced that we're being acquired by a company called GreenCheck Verified. GreenCheck provides software for cannabis for banks and credit unions. And so a number of you may be on the GreenCheck platform or have heard of PayQuick and GreenCheck. Now we're becoming one company. I'll ask a quick question. How many of you smoke weed? No, don't answer that one. Too invasive, I get it. How many of your institutions are partnering with and working with cannabis operations? Any? None? How many of your institutions are taking cannabis deposits? Now you all need to raise your hands. You all are. Yeah. So let's look in that mirror and we know nothing about that. Well, there are 30,000 institutions that have been licensed by the states, the 38 states that are allowing cannabis in the United States today, and still illegal at the federal level. But we're making slow progress there to allow banking for this SAFE Banking Act, and other acts are coming to fruition. 7 times approved and not ratified. But anyway, so there are 500,000 potential members. Some of those are already members that are working in the cannabis industry today in the United States. So that is a market that you can't necessarily ignore. And those family members and households of those are also parts of your member community and potential member community there. And so cannabis is here to stay. More people are using cannabis than cigarettes today. Cannabis taxes are higher than than cigarette taxes, also higher than alcohol taxes in the US for beer and wine. And so it's very, very hard to give up on those tax revenues, as we saw with gambling, as gambling came across the United States, started in Vegas, but then in the more recent years quickly populated to many, many other states. And so this is definitely here to stay, definitely mainstream for your members, definitely mainstream for your communities as well. And especially the investment that a number of us talked about, communities that have been deprived and impacted by very, very biased laws around enforcement of cannabis regulations. As you guys may have heard, Biden pardoned a number of federal offendees. There are literally tens of thousands of more on the state level. Those were federal level that were Biden. So that Biden pardoned. So much more to do there. Participating in this is an opportunity for the credit union, I think, especially for those that are focused on their community reinvestment as well. And so there are technologies. Now, this has been around for 8 or 9 years, right? Cannabis banking. It was bags of cash that were moving around. No longer, right? It's about 50% bags of cash moving about now. We are using technology, ACH, wires, checks, and all the normal things that small and medium businesses need to operate any quarter business. An HVAC, a hair salon, it's all the same stuff. Pay your employees, buy products, serve customers. That's what cannabis operators are doing. And that's all they're looking for from their banking relationship. And so obviously great opportunities for members there. So I would encourage you to use the technology that's available to serve that. Or if you decide not to serve cannabis operators, embrace the employees that are in those communities as members to your institution and serve them, and use an outsourcing resource like a PayQuick or other companies that serve cannabis operators to be able to serve the business. If you're not comfortable serving that business, don't want to apply the people, technology, and processes to serve those cannabis businesses.
I'll ask a follow-up question that's tied to all 3 of these things. So with each one of these specific instances actually, let me rephrase that a little bit. With Michael and Robert's specific instances, Todd's subject comes into play because the alternate money movement pathway for sports gambling, or all gambling really, and cannabis banking is also quickly becoming crypto or blockchain. And there are a lot of fintechs taking opportunities to take advantage of building platforms to allow cannabis banking industries to service their supply chain and ultimately their customers by allowing them to purchase crypto or Bitcoin with their credit or debit card, which is perfectly legal, and we let that happen all day long. And then they're able to take the Bitcoin and actually purchase product from a dispensary. So they're bypassing a lot of the traditional payment methods, as Robert kind of alluded to. Same thing we're starting to see with some of the apps around sports betting, and the ability to use Bitcoin seems to be the one I've seen as the most popular choice to be able to place or collect your proceeds off of sports betting. So for credit unions, where that's now starting to chip into the payment rails that we use all day long and a lot of our businesses are kind of built on, what recommendations might you guys make to assess or vet some of the technologies that are available to credit unions to maybe educate themselves as well as also come up with some risk mitigation strategies for how they might be able to support the payment platforms a little bit differently and not push as many people maybe to crypto or Bitcoin and away from a credit union?
I guess I'll start. I kind of go back to my opening statement of just allowing that transaction to happen. I mean, right? And, you can set limits. Like, it could be $500, it could be $200, like, right? But I don't know if anyone's ever, like, done, I mean, I've done this. I have an sportsbook app, and, like, right, it comes out as, like, flowers.com or My Diamonds, and it's like not the actual company that you're actually doing. I think we talked yesterday about using data, right? And using that transactional data. Like, if you allow it through and you allow that, you can actually see what your members are doing, right? And if all of a sudden it's $500 to this sports gambling app, $500 to this sports gambling app, and you can start tracking it, maybe you do serve up that ad about, financial literacy or making sure, hey, like, do you need help? I think we were talking earlier this week, and, you used to have a member care unit, right? Where you could reach out to members and kind of say, hey, just checking in, just want to make sure that you're doing okay. Are there any financial products that you have? Like, you can market it, right? So instead of forcing people, because, like, I can go buy a Bitcoin and then take that Bitcoin and go invest in a sports gambling app and then gamble and then do my winnings that way. If it's at least going through the credit union rails, then we at least have visibility of what our members are doing, and we can help them if you start seeing them going down a path that is, potentially detrimental to them.
Helping them is one thing. Promoting it is another thing. And we talked this yesterday a little bit about boards of directors, and one of our challenges has been our board. We have very, I would say, conservative policies at our credit union, and so for us, we do a lot of education with our board, and as these things move into the mainstream, and so we really didn't anticipate that. And I'll give you a good example. We do commercial real estate lending in Southern California, and we had a $18 million commercial real estate loan right in front of us just very recently, and it was a mixed-use property, so it had some retail on the first floor, and the potential borrower was leasing space to a dispensary, and we had to pass on that loan because our board of directors can't get over the fact that they're distributing a legal drug, but and so that's been a big challenge for us.
Yeah, on the consumer side, relative to tools that you mentioned that may be converting to crypto so that they can get over the Visa MasterCard prevention of using Visa and MasterCard branded tools, American Express and Discover included in that. We don't recommend the technology players that are doing conversions to crypto to purchase cannabis. That's something that we think all credit unions and FIs and others that are serving the industry should get educated on. And I'll do a quick commercial for Green Check Verified has thousands of people coming to our boot camp. The Emerging Market Coalition is another group that I'm involved in. Kirsten Trusco is here, the CEO of that group. Get your folks educated about this, your board as well, as to what sort of tools are available, what sort of things you should steer away from, especially consumer-related things that may be converting transactions. You don't want your customers using those tools necessarily they're liable to get shut down, and your consumers may have, your members may have trouble with them. So we don't think that's a great idea for the future. Again, lobby your issuers to say this should be allowed for our merchant businesses to be able to accept credit cards. That's a safety concern. It's also a convenience concern. It's also a way for them to sell more, right? Because more people will put more on, hopefully, your issued cards.
Thank you. So just real quick, I'm in the agricultural business. That's what pays me to do my mortgage and whatnot. In Ventura County, I have lots of relationships with farmers, growers, those people that feed us for all over the U.S. So how they get paid is market price. Well, radishes are going to be this today, lettuce is this today. Very volatile. Well, hemp came into our marketplace, if you will, and some other products. And so all of a sudden, there was a group of farmers that said, you know what, we're losing our ground. We don't have water. We don't have all of these things. And they said, let's grow hemp. Let's just try it. Just try it. And they made more money in one season of growing hemp. Now, it didn't process it, didn't go into oil, just growing it and harvesting it than they did in 5 years of growing fresh produce. And for that, I want a piece of this for our credit, because these are people that help us, right? They're in our community. But because they use different irrigation, different products to grow this, they're targeted. And I'm just fighting like the dickens so these people can stay in business and continue to feed the U.S. Has nothing to do with use. It's just what it's about. What they harvest is none of my business. There's other things out there that's maybe being harvested. But I think we need to open our minds even farther, boards of directors included. I find that it's not necessarily our board, but it's our staff who have to deal with regulators. And some regulators admit they turn their back, and some go, not here. It's hard. It's hard.
Roxy, I think you came up with another panel idea around food scarcity and credit union funding agriculture. So next underground, yeah.
And I'd recommend that you talk to the NCUA and about how they regulate. Rodney Hood, in particular, is a huge embracer of the cannabis community, especially for the credit unions and you guys serving their communities. So there's a great opportunity to serve your farmer, and this happens and I'm right up the road in Calabasas. So up to Santa Barbara. Lots of the folks that were growing cilantro are now growing marijuana and cannabis products. And they're just farmers. And all they did was rotate to a different crop. And by the way, you make the best strawberries in the entire world in Ventura County. I think there's a great opportunity, and the education is a place to start. And the NCUA, actually, we train the NCUA examiners on what to look for in regulation. There are standards that the industry has put together by doing this for 8 or 9 years, and Partner Credit Union and North Bay Credit Union up in the Bay Area, and many others around the country have brought a standard that is starting to become a standard for the industry. And Rodney Hood is a very strong supporter of that. So get your board educated, and some of the folks but you don't want weed in your branches. You don't want a whole lot of extra cash coming in. You want to digitize that kind of stuff so it's safe for everybody.
On the regulatory topic, it's actually, I'm here because Rodney Hood asked. He said, he asked that Emerging Markets Coalition host an event in DC Bob was there, and he stood up as the keynote and said, this is an opportunity to serve the community. It's about safety, it's about security, it's about deposits. He said, please come out and help educate on what are the real risks and rewards, not the reefer madness kind of stuff. And I just flew in yesterday from a cannabis conference, cannabis business conference. They need proper community credit unions. There's Bob mentioned some good folks out there. There's some not good folks out there that make us all look bad. And it ties so strongly to the edicts and the ethics of credit unions. So I'd emphasize, and with Bob's platform, it makes it so much easier. You don't have to hire an army of compliance folks.
All right, are there any other final questions out in the audience? Okay. In that case, I want to thank the panelists for sharing some of their information today and being able to, again, it was nice to be able to wrap up or tie in some of the other conversations that we've had during the course of this event with fintechs and crypto and blockchain and all of that. And do you feel a little bit cooler knowing you're part of counterculture now?
I do. And I convinced one person to buy crypto too.
We technically are, and I apologize, I forgot this. We are all part of a counterculture because underground is a little bit of a counterculture, right? Thank you, everyone.
Let's give our panel one more round of applause. So I want to note, I did see how many faces got red when the question was asked who smokes weed in the room. So no one had to raise their hand. I have the opportunity now to talk a little bit about how this ties in and begin to wrap it as we get close to the end of our 2-day underground. But I want to do that by starting to ask you a few questions. How many of you sit on the board of a credit union? Some of us are here as volunteers and others are here as executives and also do that. How many of you sit on the board of a CUSO? Several of you. And how many of you currently are partnering with fintechs? How many, after the last couple of days, have at least heard of or met somebody else that you'd like to partner with? Yeah, several, great. And how many are going to revisit their credit and risk-based pricing and look at their models when they get back? Yeah, several. And how many have met somebody new here at the Underground that they hope to keep in touch with? All right, a lot of hands went up there. And how many of you are fired up to make something happen? So now I want to talk about, and Harold kind of opened this conversation, but I want to talk about and challenge all of you to think inside the box. And the reason that I'm putting that challenge out there is this. We get so often caught up in what's happening in the outside world, what's happening around us, competing with our neighbors, competing with different people, that we forget about what's really important and maybe neglect our priorities. And so I want to challenge us to think inside and really look and have an opportunity to really look inside and be the best that we can be. And I wrote down a few quotes from different people today that I think are pretty outstanding. Aaron Mendez challenged us on mission share and then thus would get our fair share. Todd Clark was talking about mind share and wallet share and taking that to the next level. Samantha Paxson also said your P&L really should be centered around the member, not just the product profitability. Brian Kass said that innovation really is a muscle that we need to develop. Selfa Sauceda, first of all, you said that you were intimidated by people in the room. I feel like we should be intimidated by you. So excellent job. And she said, if you want to treat people equally, then we need to treat people differently and be as customized as we can in our offerings. Harold then talked about storybook lending, and Scott LaSalle said there's no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to lending. So my challenge to you with thinking inside the box is 4 steps. The first is to assess, and the first step to change is to be aware of your own bullshit. right? Is to look inside and say, what is it that we're doing? What are the barriers to success? What are those things where we're getting in our own way? And wanting to make sure that we get an outside perspective, that we are actually getting a realistic assessment of what's happening in the organization in order to set a benchmark. The second step is to revisit your external value proposition, returning to what really is your core, returning to what really is important as an institution. Because when we really differentiate as credit unions, are we going to be the best and the fanciest technology as fintechs? No. Can we partner with them? Yes. Are we going to have the best rates? No. We just really aren't. Even when we talk in strategic planning, it's hard to beat 0% financing at Ford at the end of the day, right? But what can we be the best at? And that's our core mission in that relationship with our members. Step 3 in thinking inside the box is to do a review or define your internal value proposition and what it is and who you are as a leader, and keep your word as a boss. We've been talking DEI initiatives. We've been talking youth, capturing the youth for so long at this point that what are we doing about it? How are we actually executing on those initiatives? And how can we create efficiencies? And the final, number 4, is to elevate the bullpen, the second team, the closers. You can't win a championship this year by thinking about next year's roster. Now, we need to partner with the future. But without today, there is no future. And we often overlook the people that are there every day with you. Do they even want to be there? Do they even want to be there working with you? And how are we taking care of the humans that are within our organizations that, oh, by the way, are going to execute on all these visionary ideas that we come back with? Right? So I urge all of us to make sure we're taking away that we're really thinking about the people that are going to make this happen and how they can truly make a difference in the lives of our members and communities. So we want to think inside the box. And as we do that, and we transition to our final panel here, we get to think forward and going towards Money 2030. And so I want to introduce our final panel. First, our moderator, Stephen Bohannon, is heading on up, the founder of Alchemy. And he knows what works and has looked at a little bit about what doesn't work, right? And next, we have Tony Patel, the CEO of CU Direct. And he can hopefully give us an insight on auto lending income, because it drives the bottom line of many of our credit unions. And maybe you brought a crystal ball with you, I'm hoping, something to give us what's happening in the future. The third person joining us up here is Joan Opp, who is the CEO of Stanford Federal Credit Union. And she has members from Google, from Tesla, and her organization is driven by innovation while partnering with fintechs. And finally, we've got Brett Martinez, CEO of Redwood Credit Union. And he says and talks to us about the credit union's brand really is around love. So how do we take that love into the future? Please take it away.
All right. Envisioning the future, predicting the future, easy to do. So I thought, I was thinking about this panel and kicking this off, and so I was thinking back. I remember when we started Alchemy in 2009, the thing that we used to always say was, what will banking look like in 2020? And that seems so far off. 2020 will never be. We'll never even get there. But it's like, what's this grand plan? And the thought was, 2020, what will happen? And then we need to build a system for what banking will look like in 2020. But if I'm being honest, I would say it was more generic when I was thinking about, well, things will be more digital. There'll be fewer people going to the branches. There'll be more people going online. And that's fine, but it's not real detailed, right? It's not real specific. It's just more, better, faster, slower, these descriptors that weren't really specific. And then recently, I had the opportunity to go through, has anyone in this room ever been through a future vision meditation group session? Have you guys ever done one of these? Okay, back here. Okay, cool. Yeah, well, Joan, get ready for it. So we recently did this. So actually, we have a new CEO at Alchemy. It started about a year ago. And so one of the things he did, when he brought in, we have a third-party consultants that come in to help us. We call our executive leadership team, we call it the first team. And so we brought these folks in, and it's about kind of team building and things. And they told us we had like a 2-day offsite to work on team building. And one of the things we had to do was sit in a room together. It's just one of the exercises. 10 minutes of silence, closing your eyes in a circle. But let me tell you, and look, if those of you know me, I'm skeptical about all these kinds of things, right? So to me, I thought it was just hokey. But as we did it, they said, okay, here's what I want you to do. So we all close our eyes, and they start saying things like, okay, think 5 years into the future, okay? What's the size of the company at that time? Pause. How many employees do you have? How many customers do you have? How do your employees feel about working here? How do your customers feel about you? How easy is it to do business with you? What's changed about the company? What are the biggest things? How does your working relationship with the other members on this team, what does that look like? How has that changed? And so you're sitting there like, and so what initially became this very uncomfortable thing with 8 of us sitting around silent in a circle with our eyes closed, then you start really thinking about this. And so then they challenged you to be specific. And then when we were done, we all wrote down on the paper, we opened our eyes, and then we wrote down on the paper what it was. No one knew what each other's were, and then they collected them and then put them up. And it was amazing to see just the way we envision things. Certain things, very, very common. Wow, it's amazing how much we're on the same page. Other ones, very different. Wow, it's amazing but you know what's so important is that if you've got a group of people, whether it be a close executive team like that or a community like this, if our vision of the future is disconnected, it will very much change the way we behave today, right? In other words, if my vision of what banking is going to be like in 2030 is very different than what your vision is, we're probably going to work on different things today. So one of the things that I want you all to think about, well, whether or not you all want to take that meditation exercise back, I will tell you, I became a believer in it. It's amazing to have 10 minutes of silence with nothing happening and just thinking. But one of the things I want to challenge you all, even after this panel today, is when you start thinking about where banking is going to be in 2030 and what you have to do, be specific. Like, really think about it. Don't just say things like, well, data is going to have a bigger part in it. Yeah, easy, good bet. It's like betting on black or red on roulette, right? No, pick a number. Pick a number on the table, right? So as we go through this today, I just want to say, regardless of what we talk about, which I don't know what this wonderful panel is going to say, I want you all to think about taking that back and getting kind of specific and thinking about specific use cases and how it's going to be a little different in your credit union in 2030, and then say, what do I have to do today to really manifest that vision, that future reality there, all right? All right, so hopefully that's a good enough setup for you. I'm going to start with you. So we think about 2030, banking in 2030. What would say, let's start with one. So let's say with what's the biggest thing that you think is going to be different in it's going to be like in 2030 that requires us to think about, invest, or change behavior today in order to get ready for it?
I think there's a lot of things. I would just start by saying, first, I apologize I didn't make it to these last couple sessions. I thought this has been really a good, I started in the first session yesterday, and I get to finish today, and so it's been really good for me. But I just think the change that's going to happen in the next 10 years is going to be greater than the change we've seen in the last 10 years. I just think it's going to be hard for a lot of credit unions to keep up. I really think it is. I think credit unions are going to be out of data centers by 2030. I think that's where
meaning they'll fully be in the cloud.
They'll be in the cloud. Yes, they're going to go in the cloud like everybody else. If you were to start a credit union today, you start it in the cloud. So I mean, there's a number of things I think that would change. But if that's the one question.
Yeah, great. Okay.
And by the way, I've never met Stephen before, so nice to meet you. You see
so
how well we planned this panel?
No, but that's a good one, because when you think about it, even though we have various technologies today that are in the cloud, when you think about everything, everything being in the cloud, which ultimately would mean you wouldn't actually have to have a physical location, right? For staff, for call center, for sales, for loan operations, for anything else. So 100% in the cloud. So that's a good one. Joan?
So I had a whole 5 minutes ready to
go
talk about
ahead.
that.
I'm
not going to go into now, but I actually think that debit and credit as it exists today will be gone in 10 years.
How's that?
Well, I don't know that I agree with Todd on investing 5% of my savings in Bitcoin, but I do think that the technology isn't going anywhere. I think It's going to evolve. Right now it's investments, but I think it'll evolve into something more stable. I think the end game is to replace the rails. I think that's why there's been so much investment in it. And the retailers, obviously, if you get into a stable coin and it's in your wallet like a debit and credit card is today, and you're making payments, and that's a more cost efficient, there's a cost to it, you shift the cost. But I just think that's what the end game is. And I just think that we should all be paying attention to that. Payments, lending is where we make our money, right, as financial institutions, but people doing their payments is what keeps them involved with you, and then you're thought of first for that loan because you're my primary financial institution. As the payment world changes, and I think it's one of the biggest components of our business that's going to change in the next 10 years faster than it did in the last 10 years. I agree with Tony there. We have to be paying attention, and we have to be prepared to copy and evolve, see what's happening, right? We don't have the investment to put into it. I think people were talking earlier about investing. I actually think that's the wrong strategy. I think we could invest $100 million in something. There's bigger players than us investing hundreds of millions of dollars into what's going to happen. We need to be paying attention to it and spending our resources in order to be prepared to move. So that's what I think.
Just to comment on that, if I can, just one sobering thought is that, I think the interchange on a per transaction basis that you're getting today is the most you're ever going to get going forward, right? So that's just going to go down. So it's all about volume if you are going to stay in this game, and it's all the other players that are coming in at a much lower cost to be able to do it.
Joan, the point you're making is basically you have to stay up to date and on the edge of what payments are doing, because that, not because of payments in and of itself is the end game, but because it will affect the lending side of it. So you can't afford to just kind of wait and see on that.
Agreed.
Yeah. Brett?
So I'm going to take my 5 minutes. You guys close your eyes.
I love it. I love
and
it.
We're going to be quiet for about 5 minutes. So I think there's a big difference between change and pivot. I like the word pivot the other day. I've been in this industry for 36 years, and if I really think about it, there hasn't been a substantial amount of change. I think the cloud is more of a pivot. It's not necessarily changing our business model. I'm very positive about my credit union's future and the future of the credit union industry. I think there's three things that is important: having a solid business model, having a strong brand, and continuing to differentiate, do everything different than everybody else does, because there's too much of that other stuff, whatever it is. Looking into the future, I think, is interesting, and certainly we've all been in these sessions where they've talked about the future. There's this one thing that has stood out to me in 1994, being in multiple planning sessions and lots of conferences, and they were being very specific. 20 years out, which was 2014, no cash and no branches. How'd that work out, right?
No checks. Checks are going away.
No checks, no cash. Checks almost got there. So when I look into the future and think about disruption, I break our model into three different areas. So we bring in people's money and turn around and give them access to that money. I don't even think we give them return, especially in the past several years. So it's just the access point, which is payments. Turn around and lend that money out to people that are likely to pay it back. And then you have the interchange, or non-interest income. And payments and lending, there's a lot of pull. I agree with Tony. I'm very concerned about interchange moving forward. We're on our way to the $10 billion mark, and we get a $26 million hit on debit interchange as a gift to the $10 billion mark, so we're very focused on that. Overdraft protection and NSF, we all know what's going on there, so there's a lot of pulls on those. And we have 85% checking penetration, so all of this stuff is very important to us. On the non-interest income side, we have an auto dealership, an insurance agency, and a wealth management division to kind of offset and diversify that. So I look at those three buckets. What am I concerned about? I'm concerned about payments. And I said there hasn't been a lot of change in past 36 years, but the biggest change I've seen is since 2007 when Apple phone came out and smartphones came out. That's the past 15 years out of that 36 is where the change is. And the most amount of change that I've seen is in the payments area. So we've talked a little bit about, so iPhone came out in 2007. Venmo, which is owned by PayPal, started in 2011, became a verb, which is a big deal, in 2017, Venmo Me. And then Zelle, which a lot of you, I assume, are partnering with. There's 1,700 financial institutions that are partnering with Zelle. By the way, Venmo has there's 209 million adults in the United States. Venmo has 83,000 customers, and Zelle has a little over 100,000 customers. They're both growing. I think Zelle is about 55%, and I think Venmo is about 45% year over year. So that's something I think that we should be very concerned about. It's something I'm very concerned about. We're watching our trending and with our data where our members' money is coming into the credit union and automatically going over to Venmo, which is now their primary financial institution. Graph that and see how that is changing very, very quickly over time. So our credit union did not go with Zelle. We created our own, what we call our RCU Pay. So it's our own P2P platform, zero cost, zero fraud. 75% is member-to-member transactions. Technology is great. Members, it's instantaneous. So the transfer is automatic. The part that we struggle with is member to non-member. You can send it to anybody, but they have to, it's next day. So there's a timing issue, which I think we can fix. And they have to have their own routing number, which is just makes it a little bit more difficult. And certainly we're not a verb. So it's growing, but we chose not to partner with Zelle. And if you think about Zelle and Venmo specifically becoming a digital bank, they're working on crypto, they're working on savings, they're working on budgeting. And yet it's a verb, and several financial institutions have partnered with Zelle. So if I worry about something, and I don't worry about things too often, that's what I'm concerned about.
Side. All right, so let's do again. Let's think about a specific topic, and then make a prediction. And if you say I don't feel comfortable making the prediction, then don't make the prediction. Okay, so let's talk about this is 8 years, right? 2030. What will be the biggest difference of let's pick physical service channels. So let's talk about call center. How will that be different 8 years from now than how it is right now?
It'll be a lot more like Amazon. Remember, I think I said yesterday, how many times have you called Amazon, and how many millions of transactions they do a day and don't get phone calls. That call centers really, I think you need them, and you do have to have that member service because, but our technology should work well enough where they may not be needed that much, know. And if I could, because I didn't get my 5 minute.
You can take it.
But I guess
I'm just trying to stimulate the conversation. But if you want to go on it, go on it.
Well, I just wanted to say, I think the whole key here is, I think the one word is relevancy. If we can continue to be relevant to our members, and you look back in 2000, there were 10,000 plus credit unions. In 2010, there were 7,500 credit unions, and now there's about less than 5,000. So that's the trend line that we're on. And I think this isn't new to anybody, but it's just something to think about. And as you think about relevancy, is there time to actually have a relevancy score? Can we actually say how relevant is my credit union when you're doing planning and things like that? And do we need to think about some other decisions? How do we there's been a lot of mergers going around. Not too many banks are buying credit unions. Credit unions I see are buying a lot of banks, but I think the thing that also I would put the relevancy kind of under, maybe a score in 4 different areas, and that would be, one, it's what a lot of people have been talking about, and I think a lot of the credit unions in this room have this, and that is trust. In their, how much do your members trust you? And it could be a net promoter score, it could be something along those lines. I think the other one is, your value proposition and how it measures up against the competition in some way that we have to be able to say that you are staying relevant. And the third is profitability. There's a lot of credit unions in this country right now that are not profitable. And I think those 3 things, and I think the 4th one that somebody brought up, which I think is really the key thing, and that is, do your kids belong to the credit union? I think if you get that, then I think you're going to be, and how many, my daughter, she's just 1 year out of school, and she was actually an intern at Schools First Credit Union, and so she's been indoctrinated into the great philosophy that Bill and his credit union has. And for the last 2 weeks, she keeps, and she's 1 year out of school, has a marketing job. She keeps, sending me a note that, texting me saying, hey, this offer from Chase is going to give me $225 if I take this checking account. Should I do it? I keep telling her no. They're going to fee you to death then too. But she goes, that's a lot of money to me, So just like all the other stories we heard about kids, and she's a Venmo, user too. I just think keeping them engaged is going to be a key measurement that we need to have. So I just think relevancy is the key that we need to talk about as we go into 2030. But it is going to be a different world for sure. And I think that's the year that I retire, so that's good too.
That's good. Well, you don't have to worry about it then. Joe, what do you think? What is it, if you were to vision that in 2030, what does the physical service channel look like?
So I'm going to go to your first question and back up to my 5 minutes. It's really hard to sit in between these 2 guys, by the way. So I think contact centers will largely be automated in a number of different ways. And I was in a meeting with several people in this room back in August where the CEO of Jack Henry gave an example of his son applying for a credit card, and he did something wrong and got a letter that said he did something wrong, give us a call, we'll straighten that out and fund your card. And he was like, I'm not calling him. Because his dad said, what are you going to do? He's like, I'm not calling him. And he goes, I know what I did wrong now. I'm just going to go back in and fix it, and they'll send me my card, which is what he did. He didn't want to call. Right, so I think automation may be actual, voice automation, or it might just be text, it might be chat, it might be, but I do think the investment in technology for AI and RPA will largely automate, and I think the consumers of tomorrow don't want to make a phone call. So I do think that'll be completely changed.
You think the chat bots and virtual assistants will get to the
It's
point?
going to get smarter and smarter and smarter.
To where it's going to handle 90+%.
I think it already could. If we, I don't think we're there yet, but I think the technology is there, and I think it's getting better. Back to just this whole 2030. I think credit unions have a great future. I think there'll be a lot fewer of us. And I think those that continue to thrive, and that's different than survive, but I think thrive will be paying attention to a number of these things that we're talking about. I do think payments is going to be completely different, but we have a huge opportunity to continue to be relevant, using Tony's word. I think fintech, we have to watch fintech in more than one way. We always talk about the technology, but we're very dated as an industry in how we approach business. The panel earlier talking about lending, we do lending very conservative traditionally, and the fintech have approached it from a much more get it out the door. Somebody talked about savvy money, clutch, like just no credit score, a different way of thinking about it. We have to stop the traditional way of thinking, and lots of us have management teams that have been in place for decades. And no offense to anybody in this room, but we need some new blood, right? We've got to think about things completely different. I mean, we've used don't tweak it, just completely scrap it and somebody rebuild it. If I had the crystal ball, somebody said earlier, I actually had that in my notes. I'm like, I would love to have somebody up here that could tell me exactly what it's going to look like in 2030, but I don't think any of us know. But I think we would all agree that it's going to be a lot different than it is today. Right.
That's a lot. Only 8 years. That's when you think about, obviously, something that's been around for a long time. Only 8 years. So, Brett, starting with you, I got a pointed question for you. So, data, AI, ML, we hear these terms, and there's impact on sales, marketing, fraud detection, service. There's all kinds of impact. Where do you think, if you were to predict 8 years from now, we'll see the biggest impact of artificial intelligence and machine learning in the credit union business? Will it be on lending underwriting? Will it be on fraud protection? What do you think?
Yes. So data's, it's 7 years and 2 months away. It's not 8 years. So let's be specific.
January 23rd.
So, I mean, we're implementing AI Zest on lending as we speak. I think fraud is definitely an area we talked about. Yesterday, getting into watching people's transactions and getting involved. We do that. I would also say that those people are in front of us every single day. So AI is going to be heavy on fraud. Call center, I think AI is going to be important on call center. And I agree with Tony that where we need to go is kind of the Amazon. You don't pick up the phone and call the call center. That's not going to be 7 years and 2 months out. That's where we need to be, but we're not going to.
You think it's going to be further out than that? Okay. He disagrees. I like it. We got a disagreement here.
I agree.
Let's unpack this.
I agree where it needs to go. It's just not going to happen in 7 years. And so as AI we will implement AI in our call center, and we have a lot of work to do in our call center, but it's not going to get to the Amazons and.
Well, I mean, one of the things that Amazon does, there's a reason you don't need to call them generally, because they are a company that has built a platform on APIs that gives you incredible insight into all the back office processing of things. Obviously, you can track your delivery card down to it arriving at your house, right? That's why you don't call and say, "Where's my package?" You know that's where your package is, right? So I think that's one of the things until we modernize some of our back office systems is, well, hey, what's the status of that loan right now? Well, someone knows, right? Someone looked at the screen and told you, oh, here's where it is. It's sitting on this person's desk or whatever. But until that gets revealed, and think about payment processing, especially when you get to wires and ACH batches and things like that. Hey, what's the status of that? I see it's been submitted, but where is it? Has it left your terminal? Has it gone to the Fed? Where is it on their side? We have actually the insight to be able to expose all that for self-service. So those are some of the things I think we have to get to before we can have the Amazon type service, which is all self-service, but you got to expose this to me. And right now we don't. There's too much obfuscated from the member to where it requires them to call in to ask that question, right? So Amazon does an amazing job at that. It's pretty slick. All right. Let's talk, and I think it ties into fraud as well, but let's talk about fraud. It ties into payments as well. Let's talk about fraud mitigation. So where do you think the biggest, are we going to have, obviously we know there's going to be more fraudsters, right? Because it's easier to try to rip people off, from the comfort of your couch. But where do you think the fraud dynamic changes? What's the new vector, if you look 8 years, that we have to be on the lookout for? What's the biggest risk for fraud?
Well, I was the reason I stepped out is I was actually at I'm on a board of a QSO that's here, that's member pass or Bonify that's trying to mitigate fraud for credit unions. That's for identity and things like that. The thing that actually we were just talking about too is that there's the credit unions we're working with. Nobody has one way to deal with fraud. Nobody has one way to mitigate fraud, and I think that's. They become as smart as the people that are trying to prevent them. The fraudsters. So it's never going to be done. I think the biggest worry I have, given that everything is, on our phones, is that somebody's just going to come up to you and stick a gun in your face and say, "Get your phone out. Let's start transferring money."
Great point.
That is a very easy thing to do. Face recognition, and just have you just clean out all your accounts and send them somewhere. That is actually probably the one that I'm thinking. Why isn't that?
Good point. Before you say, "I don't have any cash on me," they say, "I don't need you to have cash on you. Pull your phone out."
Yeah, exactly.
And Zelle
okay, we're all freaked out now.
That's a great one. That's a really good point.
It's a great one, but let's hope it doesn't happen. But it probably will.
That's actually a really good point.
Well, if Tony thought about it, somebody else has thought about this stuff.
I think the shocking thing with fraud right now is that people are so willing to send their money someplace that they have no idea, right? Because of the technology. So where's fraud going to go? The fraud we have today, if people just stopped and thought about it, it's not the old days of getting the skim on the back of the card, stolen or whatever that then somebody used that didn't involve the consumer at all. The biggest majority of fraud we have today, the consumer's involved in, right? They were tricked. They're just not thinking. I mean, we had a commercial borrower send $1.9 million thinking he's paying us off, and he didn't send it to us. It's like, well, how are you possibly paying us off if you send it from Bank of America to Chase to pay off your loan with us? We saved it for him, thank goodness, but because we could get a hold of somebody to freeze it. But people are so quickly convinced to give somebody all their credentials or to move their money so I don't know. Fraud to me today has very little to do with us and a lot more to do with just people and how they use today's technology to move money without stopping and thinking.
You think that will change in 8 years from now in terms of the attack vector? Do you think? You hear about it a little bit in the crypto world, right, where you get certain exchanges and things that have been hacked, but generally you haven't really had a large-scale hack of any major financial institution, at least not one that we know of. And you're right, the attack vector is the uneducated or unwitting consumer or small business, right? You think that's going to change 8 years from now as we educate people better and everything, or do you think that the systems that we have are so kind of locked down that that's really kind of the only alternative for the criminal is preying upon the...
Yeah, so fraud's the area we've hired more people than any other part of our organization. It's the growing part. We're really good at it. We don't have the losses, and our members don't have the losses that most have. But it really, crypto's changing it. It's where we're losing because it's gone, right? Once it goes into that environment, it's gone. Data, we're talking about seven years. 2 months from now, be specific. Our data journey was about 7 years. First we had to get the data, warehouse the data, get good at that part, and then we're in the final process of teaching our people how to use it. And the fraud area, one of the ways we're winning in the fraud area is really using that data, not just having the data, but learning how to use that data to see things ahead of time. But crypto, I think, is the biggest change for us.
I've got kind of a lightning round of stuff, and then we'll be done. Is that good? Or questions? So I just want kind of maybe a one word or a short answer for each of these. In 2030, do you think the majority of credit unions will be banking cannabis businesses? Yes or no?
Yes.
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 You think the majority of credit unions will have a crypto offering that they have that allows people to be in crypto, whether it be buy, sell, hold, trade, whatever? Yes or no?
Yes.
We already do.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, majority. Okay. Do you think that by 2030, do you feel that the majority of credit unions will be underwriting loans off things other than FICO, a large portion of their loans?
Absolutely.
Absolutely was my word.
We're doing it. So
okay,
yes.
A large portion of the loans already. Okay, good. All right, so those are a few quick little predictions there, and then I'll turn it over to you, Brandy.
Any questions out in the group?
So my question is, so we're talking about where we're going to be 10 years from now to keep up with Amazon.
7 years, 2 months, and what, 8 days?
So, all right. Well, we all in this room know that Amazon is not just sitting on their thumbs, not making any innovation, right? So what concerns me is we're chasing Amazon today when the Amazon tomorrow is probably going to be crypto ready, have their own bank, not needing fintechs. Where does that leave credit unions in that world? And when does that conversation start having about the real doom and gloom of what is around the corner for us?
Well, I mean, we don't have a lot of control over what you're saying. I think the only thing we have control over is what you can do with your credit union and how you can make it better. And I would just say, as I said a little bit yesterday, and I'm a little self-serving on this, but I do think leaning into the QSOs, Todd, and they are keeping credit unions relevant. I mean, he has 30,000 ATMs he's connecting together. If you guys didn't have that, I think he wouldn't be very relevant today to a lot of your members. Hopefully we're doing that too with Origins. Cuddle is a verb, by the way, at the dealerships. So we have done a good job of creating a lending channel that you guys own and control. But we need to lean into the QSOs and try to connect them to the fintechs. I think that's where, like we're going with Zest and we're going with Informed IQ. I just think it's how do we work together now in these next 7 years to really improve, to try to Amazon our credit unions, I guess, how to make them better. And there's a lot of, there's 10,000 fintechs out there and 9,000 of them won't be here in 7 years, I can tell you that. So we got to be very careful and work together to do that.
Why were you pointing at me when you said that? He said it won't be
I'm
here.
still trying to integrate with
I hope
you.
that was just your hands talking.
I'm still
and
trying to
nothing
integrate with you.
subconscious
Would
there.
you get it done?
A lot of this, what we are discussing, those can be only done by the employees that you have, right? Now, they are all so busy. Anytime you talk to them, they are busy and they are working overtime. What are you doing to kind of release that pressure from your employees so that they can do what you're talking about for the future?
I think so. I mean, I would say yes, employees are always busy, but work is like water. It finds its level. All right, so you have to step back and reprioritize, make them unbusy. I really do think everybody's always busy. That's been decades, right? So you just have to get busy differently.
But I think that's some of the value of fintechs, right? They bring the expertise. The partnering with the fintechs allows you to move quicker instead of doing everything in-house. The previous question about Amazon and the concerns around Amazon is actually my concern around Venmo and Zelle, right? Very specifically. That we should be very, very concerned about. They become a digital bank. Why do we not have our own payment system? Why do I have RCU Pay versus us, the industry, having our own P2P platform? And one of the things I'm concerned about with the numbers I threw out is it too late?
So I just have to add on that. I mean, I think this is where today you have a credit or debit card in the wallet, which people use to pay. You have to be thinking about being able to do the same thing with a digital currency, whatever that ends up being. Or I do think, you're at risk of losing, a mission share. I'll use Aaron's word.
And you said you had one more? Yeah.
So
Aaron?
when I think of the future, I actually think the biggest changes is what's happening to society and to how a consumer thinks. So there's technology that's going to trend certain ways. How do you guys think of those two issues, and what's different about the attitudes of individuals and society as a whole and its shifts, and really where's the opportunities that we need to think differently that's past the trends going on in technology?
Like what would be one example of that, Aaron, just to spark us off?
Okay, so we're going through a huge phase right now in society on DEI as an example, right? If Black Lives Matters didn't escalate in 2020, you might not be going through DEI right now, but it did. And this isn't the only societal shifts we're going to have. So that's what I'm talking about. You got to watch, to me, society. And, I was talking to someone the other day, and I said, I don't care, management's so much more about psychology today than it's about anything else. And so that's what I'm talking about. It's the psychology of people right now.
I tell our team, if you're going to go back to school, go get a psychology degree versus a management degree. Because if you can figure out why people are thinking the way that they think. One of the things that we've spent a lot of time over the pandemic, but more because of what you're talking about, is doing a lot of training around empathy with our team. And that's had a big impact on them, with each other, with our members, and so that's our thing these days is empathy.
Yeah, what strikes me with what you're saying there, though, is it really is about what people think of credit unions and what they don't think of credit unions. The challenge I think we have right now is that we're not in the consideration set and again, a lot of you've done great jobs with your brands, but this brand thing is a big deal. And credit unions, just the words itself, credit unions, is a terrible, it'll never be a verb. It's a terrible, it's a terrible words, terrible two words, right? So how do we really, right now, I'd say Navy Federal Credit Union owns our brand. I mean, they are making people think what credit unions are on Monday Night Football. I mean, a lot of you do local advertising, are probably doing a pretty good job of it in your communities, but on a nationwide basis, we've got to be in the consideration set of every community. And how do we get there? I know we've tried to do these brand awareness things, and I've been supportive of them. I know it's been very controversial, but somehow the credit union words and what people think of it and how they know it's better than a bank, we talked about that, is something that we need to get to if we're really going to be successful, I think.
Thank you. Yeah. And thank you to our panel.
I don't have, hey, this is a fantastic panel. I'm honored. Thank you all so much for doing this. And hopefully I didn't throw you too many curveballs there, and no problem. It's all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. What a wonderful way to wrap us here with the underground. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Nice job. And I begrudgingly now am going to hand the microphone back to Susan to wrap us up.
Okay, so we're all ready to take off here, but I loved Aaron's last question. And we talked about all of the different transitions we're going to be going through and the 4 points on relevance and how critical that is. I want to emphasize, though, it's the people changes, the practices, the open banking, the willingness, as one of you mentioned, I think it was Joan, where she said that people they cause, in most cases, their own fraud. I'm guilty of that, all right? Because I get busy and I'm just like going along with it. So with the underground, we want to keep asking those questions. We want to keep saying, all right, so if this is taking place, what will happen next? All right, that's what thought leadership is. It's about strategic curiosity that gives us an opportunity to not be afraid to ask a question that may not be completely politically correct. So we've had great panels, great content. We've got great partners. I appreciate everyone. I'd like you to, as they say, GSD, we've got to get shit done. We've got some urgency out there that we need to really respond to. And so February 26th, we'll be at the Hay Adams in DC. And we hope all of you travel. Thank you for coming, and we appreciate you very much. Connecta has some bags to give out to you, so we appreciate all of our sponsors. Thank y'all.